Everybody, welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 614. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you ready for some Rare and Mythic Rare set review action today?
Oh, yeah. I'm hoping to avoid this brisket that I got up at 5 a.m. for coming out too rare. So as I informed Marshall and our producer, Jeff, I might need to take a brisket break. I've got my wireless thermometer so I can see the temp on my phone. And when it hits 185 internal, I have to go upstairs and wrap it. The good thing is once I do that, then I'm set for the next 4 hours or whatever, 5 hours. So we'll see when that comes along, though. Marshall has threatened to just do the show without me and not edit out the part that I'm gone. But you know what? It's your show.
Yes, yeah. So, and I'm also threatened to give grades on your behalf to the cards. You said that. So what are you trying to avoid here?
So there's basically the way I'm cooking the brisket's 2 stages. The first stage is uncovered, where I moisten it about every hour or so, and until it hits 185, and then you take it out, you wrap it in butcher paper, you put it back in until it hits 205. So I got up so early so I could get to the second stage without it being too late in the day.
Sounds good. Well, we'll hope that it doesn't turn out either rare or mythic rare, like the cards that we're going to be reviewing today. First, let's talk about our sponsors. Channel Fireball. It's a place to go for really anything you need, except things are changing over at CFB. They've got the marketplace rolling out near the end of the month. Here is when it should be fully done. That would mean that they don't sell singles directly anymore. They instead are a marketplace for other places, other stores, local game stores, etc., to sell them. And as part of the big kickoff for Marketplace Madness, they're calling it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for it. If you do buy stuff on the marketplace, for every $10 you spend, you're going to get an entry into a bunch of prizes, boxes of Innistrad Midnight Hunt. It even culminates with a Black Lotus at the end of the whole thing. Again, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. If you're interested in that, you can check it out and get in on the Marketplace Madness as they make the big transition from sort of traditional singles reseller to a marketplace. It's a big change over at CFB, and you can check it out while you're there. CFB Pro still going strong. If you need anything, set reviews from Luis in the written form, any of that kind of stuff from CFB Pro, you can go ahead and check it out over there and get signed up. There's really kind of flexible payment options, I would say, that make it very, very affordable if you spend any amount of money on Magic every single month, especially. So that's for Channel Fireball. The show's also brought to you by FTX. That's the safe and regulated place that you can go to trade cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and other digital assets. This is our new sponsor, and having just brought them on, we're still kind of working out our talking points with them and all that stuff. But that's the bottom line, is that, this is a company ran by people who actually care. They want to see this space and the things around them get better. It's part of their core mission statement. And they offer, again, a safe place, a regulated place where if you're in the US, you can go to ftx.us. If you're outside, you can go to ftx.com, where you can explore this space. Now, again, when we first brought them on, we said, well, why do you want to talk to Magic players about this? And they said, look, we feel that this is going to be a part of our lives going forward. And we feel that Magic players and gamers in general are the type of people who can be early adopters and who are willing to try stuff a little bit sooner. So if you're interested, we recommend checking out ftx.us in the US and ftx.com. I do also want to mention, of course, that neither Luis nor I are registered investors, and this isn't to be taken as investment advice. These type of markets are very risky. They're very volatile, and you really want to kind of know your stuff and keep within your means before you dip your toe in the pool. So make sure you educate yourself, and then you can head over and check out ftx.us. Thanks for the sponsorship. Of course, the show is always brought to you by you via the Patreon. Thanks to everybody on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources for supporting us. Luis, we're going to use grades. Tell them why.
So we use a grading scale alongside what we talk about on the show in order to kind of put a punctuation on the discussion that we've had. In general, you want to focus more on the discussion, but of course the grade can help get you there. So because this is the Rare and Mythic Set review, we're going to see more A's and F's than you would in the Common Uncommon review. Let me give you some example of some of these grades. A's are bombs, game winners, and the best cards in the set, cards like Meteor Swarm. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their color or colors, headliners for a set, and reasons to be in a particular color pair. Cards like Skullport Merchant, Magic Missile, Grim Bounty, that sort of thing. C's are playable, the pawns of limited. You don't see very many in Rare and Mythic just because rares tend to be on either side of the scale, but these are cards like Hill Giant Herd Gorger, Hobgoblin Captain, or Arborea Pegasus. D's are sometimes playable, cards you'd prefer not to run, cards that are too expensive, too situational, just generally don't get there. Cards like +2 Mace, Earth Cult Elemental, like you can put these cards in your deck, you're just not super thrilled about it. And then F's are cards that are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. You'll actually see a bunch of F's in the typical Rare and Mythic review because these are the cards that cost like 10 mana or the cards that require you to have all legendary cards in your deck, that sort of thing. Cards like Bard class, for example. There's also two subcategories. There's sideboard. Don't anticipate seeing many sideboard cards in the Rare and Mythic review because most of the Rares and Mythics aren't really sideboard material. These are very specific answers like Plummet. And then there's build around, and we will see some of these. Build around cards are cards that don't do much on their own, but if you properly build around them, they can really deliver. So cards like Teleportation Circle.
Okay, and then before we get into the first, we're going to actually start with gold this time around. But before we do, we wanted to address the day-bound, night-bound thing that we got wrong last week.
Yeah, by we, I mean me. So I do want to kind of apologize to the listeners and to you, Marshall, because you actually got it right and I corrected you incorrectly. So the way day-bound and night-bound works is when you cast a card with day-bound, so one of your werewolves, it becomes day if it's neither night nor day. Then, now that it's day, if a player on their turn does not cast a spell, on the next upkeep it flips to night. It's night or day for both players. It's not individual per player. Once it's night, if the active player casts 2 spells or more, it'll then flip to day on the next upkeep. Also worth mentioning, if it's night and you cast a werewolf, it'll come into play on the stack. It's day side, but it'll come into play as the night side. And cards that trigger when it goes from day to night or night to day, again, they set it to day if there's no state, but they'll only trigger once it flips from night to day or day to night. Also, once you started on the night day cycle, it continues for the rest of the game, even if there's no cards in play that care about it, which kind of makes me wary of putting it in like a cube or something. You do have to track it for the whole rest of the game.
Right.
So that's how it works. I should have looked at or gotten a firmer grasp on it before discussing it last week, and I'll make sure not to make that mistake going forward.
Okay, so should we start with the gold cards, Luis? Just jump right into the deep end of the pool here.
Yeah, I think starting with gold makes a lot of sense. And a big shout out to Scryfall. Last week we focused on getting the set review up as soon as possible, partially because these set reviews are long for both us and for you, the listener. So we didn't have access to Scryfall. They weren't quite ready yet. Now we have them, and Scryfall, we're not sponsored by them anyway, but I just think they're the best place to look at Magic cards online. Like when you need to find a card, when you need to look at a set, you go to Scryfall, and they've even got now a set review view, so you can kind of follow along by using that selection, which will sort it by mana cost, I believe. So
yeah,
it's an awesome site, and they're really tuned into the community and what the community is looking at, and they really care. Yeah,
they had messaged about this set review view a few sets back, and I gave them a little bit of feedback, but they kind of took it and ran. And I have to say, it's actually the opposite. They don't sponsor us. We sponsor them. I'm a patron of theirs. Like, I just think that the value add that they've added to the community by making Scryfall.com is well worth it. And yeah, anyway, enough. We are huge Scryfall fans here. So with that said, let's get going. This is a mana cost order for the gold cards. First one is called Can't Stay Away. And it is white-black for a sorcery at rare. It says return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains, if this creature would die, exile it instead. And this card, Can't Stay Away, has flashback for 3 white-black.
This is a great card. Yeah. It's not going to be hard to make this work. On a lot of cards like this, they key up mana value 2 or less, and then we have a little bit more of an issue of like, how many 2-drops are you going to have? There's no limited deck that's not going to play this. It's just, unless you end up with some 5 creature monstrosity, just creatures that cost 3 or less are going to make up, in an ideal world, 40 to 50% of your creatures, depending on where your curve ends up, it means you're always going to have targets for this unless something very strange has happened, which makes it a very clean, cheap 2-for-1. So I would give Can't Stay Away a B+.
Yeah, B+ for Can't Stay Away. The difference between being able to hit only 2 drops and only 3 drops is everything here. So hitting, up to 2s and up to 3s, I should say. Hitting 3s means that it opens up most of your deck. Next card is called Denic Pious Apprentice. It's blue-white for a 2/3 legendary human soldier at rare. Denic has lifelink. Cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities. Okay. And then it has Disturb for 2 white-blue, and it becomes Denic Pious Apparition, which is a 3/2 flyer. It's now a spirit soldier, by the way. And it says, whenever one or more creature cards are put into a graveyard from anywhere, investigate. This ability triggers only once each turn. And then it says, if Denic Pious Apprentice would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead.
This card's awesome.
Dude, that's dope.
First of all, a 2-mana 2/3 lifelink would be a very strong start, even at gold. And kind of as we're going through these gold cards, when you look at these from the perspective of first picking them, taking a 2-color card is much more of a commitment than taking a 1-color card. Our grades don't really reflect that because I don't think it's worth like just telling everyone, hey, these are all half a grade worse in your opening pack, just because you don't want to always commit to 2 colors. But Denic is obviously well worth it. A 2-mana 2/3 lifelink is great. Making cards in graveyards untargetable, that I don't think is that much of an upside. It's more likely to be good for you than your opponent because you're playing the 2 colors that care a lot about creatures in graveyards and disturb. So it protects your graveyard from exile effects, most of them. But then when you disturb it, a 3/2 flyer that's going to make a clue pretty often is really tough to beat. Denic, the front side is great early. The back side is great at any point. And overall, this card looks like an A to me. Like, yeah, I just don't see the downside.
I was going to say A- for Denic, but it's just amazing. Also, the costs are there, 2 mana for the front and only 4 mana to disturb. I think the biggest hang up that people will have is they'll read cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities and kind of hang their hat on that. Just, you can erase that line and this card is fantastic. So, and it is, like you said, likely to be slight upside for you as well, because it can't mess with your yard or get Denic out of there. Or get your other cards out of there if Denic's on the battlefield. So yeah, I like A- for Denic Pious Apprentice. This is an efficient, great card, and that's worthy. Next is called Galvanic Iteration. It is blue-red. For an instant, it's rare. Whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy, and it has flashback for 1 blue-red. These cards just almost always fail. The closest we've had was the one from like 2 sets ago, from Strixhaven. Yeah, which even then was fringe playable, and that was in an archetype that could really use it. This one having flashback, is that a changer for you? Does that change the equation for cards like this?
Well, I am generally skeptical of these cards because it's hard to make them work, and then when they don't work, they do nothing. But adding flashback, yeah, that makes me interested in playing this. If I had a deck with like 10 or more spells, ideally like at least like half of those were 3 or less cost and, had a good effect. Like, we're not talking about copying Consider here. We're talking about, copying your cathartic 2-mana deal 3 or whatever.
Right.
Then Galvanic Iteration becomes pretty strong because it's going to copy a good spell. And then later in the game, it's going to copy another good spell, if all goes according to plan. That said, you can't take this card until like, I don't know, you have at least 6 or 7 cards. And so probably you're looking at pack 2 or pack 3 is when you're more likely to be interested because you have to go pretty hard on the spells to make it worth it. I think ultimately that makes it a build around B, which is to say most decks are not going to be interested, but the decks where it's good, it is going to be good. If you have a bunch of cheap removal or bounce or, card draw, anything that's good, plus a couple heavy hitter spells, this card could lead to some pretty big blowouts.
Yeah, I'm giving it a build around grade as well, but much lower. I just, come on, being realistic here, right? So many things have to line up for this card to be even remotely touching a deck. Like primarily the blue-red deck has to be good and worth it and have a whole bunch of really cheap interactive spells, basically. And that's really a lot of setup cost for a card like this. And even then, it's not like it's the best card in your deck. It's just okay. Like, you just feel like you've crossed the line on, okay, I'm all right playing this now, but it's not like an instant win or anything like that. So I would say build around D for Galvanic Iteration. I don't think you'll see it on the stack really ever in the format. And if you do, I'm going to be really thrilled because that means that the format's pretty slow and this deck is pretty great. Ghoul Caller's Harvest is next. It's black-green for a sorcery. It's rare. It says create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed, where X is half the number of creature cards in your graveyard rounded up. And then it has flashback for 3 green-black.
So rounded up is nice. It means if you have, three creatures in your graveyard, this is going to make 2 zombies. But again, they're decayed. And in order to use the decayed zombies, you really have to be looking aggressively for sacrifice outlets, because for the most part, a decayed zombie, like, I think a good comparison is something akin to a food token, which doesn't really affect the board, can't block. When it attacks, it maybe gets them -2 life, but mostly, it won't even always do that. So it's not really a token. It's not a piece of material in the sense that we would be normally used to. It's definitely not worth a card. It's worth quite a bit less than a card. That being said, if this gets big enough and you're making 4 zombies, 5 zombies, then it does enough damage that it adds up, right? You attack them with 5 zombies, then you flash it back for 5 more zombies, and all of a sudden they're just dead. They have to start trading creatures for these tokens. So this also looks like a build around, but I'm a little cooler on this one. This looks like a build around like C, where if you can reliably fill your graveyard and additionally have sacrifice cards, this could be a solid role player. Most decks just shouldn't play this card.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. So we'll move on to Hallowed Respite. It is blue-white for a sorcery. It's rare. Exile target non-legendary creature. All right. Then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Whoops. If it entered your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Otherwise, tap it, and it has flashback for 1 blue-white. Sorcery again.
I'm not really sure what this card is kind of supposed to accomplish, because at sorcery speed, it's not a traditional blink where you're like, I'm going to save my creature or I'm going to block and blink it. It can re-trigger end of the battlefield effects. Definitely can do that. It can put a +1/+1 counter on them. It's good with the disturbed creatures in that it can you can flash back a disturbed creature and then turn it back into the front side if you want with a +1/+1 counter. But the kind of the issue with that is the backside's usually better. So I don't know how much you really want to be doing that. And then it does have flashback. You can use it aggressively, right? You cast this and flash it back to tap 2 of their creatures. But what I'm looking at with this card is you're talking about a lot of use cases, very few of which are worth a card. So I think you would need to kind of be using every part of this in a good way before you want to put it in your deck, where you're like, I'm aggressive, so I want to tap sometimes. I have some good ETBs. I've got some good self-mill or discard. And I just all these things combined make this a card. Given that it's a rare, you're not going to see it that often. Just looks kind of like a D to me, but yeah, maybe some decks will want to use it.
Yeah, it looks like a D to me as well. The real kicker for me is because you said that there's some minor use cases like attack with my thing. It gets in, okay, Hollow Respite, it's untapped now. It has a +1/+1 counter on it. That's, minor value. The thing that kills it for me is sorcery speed, because you can't use it for the stuff like you talked about to save your creature and stuff like that. But also you are just asking to get blown out. You're just like 2 mana sorcery speed, target my own creature, right? And your opponent's just like, kill it, right? It's just like, that is just such a horrible situation to find yourself in, facing down an opponent with open mana. So I like D for Hallowed Respite as well. Catilda, Dawnheart Prime is green-white for a 1/1 legendary creature, human warlock at rare. It has protection from werewolves, and human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors. Weird mix there. And then you can pay 4 green-white and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this thing does tap for mana? Yeah, okay.
It's a fancy mana dork, right? Mm-hmm. It's white-green for a 1/1 that taps for a white or a green mana. It can also block werewolves nicely, which, that's some nice upside. And then the real upside is that you can pay 6 to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It also makes your other humans tap for mana as well, which if you're green-white, you're going to have a fair amount of them. I think Catilda, all the different pieces are worth a good amount. The werewolves protection probably the least, but the other 2 abilities are quite strong. Imagine a human deck where you go play a 2-drop into Catilda plus another 2-drop, or just play this on turn 4 with 2 humans in play. It's kind of like you immediately get to tap them to cast something else, and then you start just using all that mana to start buffing your team. Or you just cast this on turn 2, draw no other humans, and it's still good.
Yep. I like it.
Looks like a B+ to me. Looks like a card I'll be pretty happy to play in any deck.
Yeah, I'd give it a B normally, but the protection from werewolves means that it'll be kind of a house against some percentage of decks. So there you go. B+ for Catild, the Dawnhart
Also
Prime.
worth noting, the werewolves count as werewolves on their human side as well. So you can block unflipped werewolves with this, and it's fine. They're basically always werewolves.
That's sweet too. Next is Ludovic Necrogenius. All right, we get Ludovic here, of the test subject, right? This is blue-black, 2/3 legendary creature, human wizard at rare. When Ludovic enters a battlefield or attacks, mill a card. That's from your library, so there you go. And then Ludovic has quite a extensive activated ability here. You can pay X blue, black, and exile X creature cards from your graveyard. That's the cost. What do you get? Transform Ludovic. X can't be 0. Activate only at sorcery speed. So Ludovic transforms into Olog Ludovic's Hubris, which is a 4/4 legendary zombie that says, as this creature transforms into Olog, it becomes a copy of a creature card exiled with it, except its name is Olog. It's a 4/4, and it's a legendary blue and black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on Olog equal to the number of creature cards exiled with it. Real elegant.
So yeah, the hubris indeed. You can pay 2 mana for a 2/3 that starts milling your graveyard, or milling cards into your graveyard, which is cool. And then ideally on turn 5 or maybe later, depending on when it's going on, you spend 5+ mana. You get probably a 5/5 or a 6/6. Because it's 4/4 overwrites whatever the creature's stats were. Though it gets the abilities of whatever creature that you copied. So, for example, if you copied a Gale Rider, right, a 3/2 flyer, this would be a 4/4 flyer with at least 1 +1/+1 counter and sometimes more. I mean, this is a good card. In fact, it's a very good card because it's a 2 mana 2/3. It fuels its own ability. Plus, milling yourself in Innistrad is value. Like until you get milled out, which is not going to happen too often, you're going to be very happy to mill yourself for 1 or 2 or 3 or what have you. You probably don't want to mill yourself for 10 that often, but in general, its triggers will help you here. And then if you have enough mana left over and you can exile it for or you can pay 6 or 7 mana, you can get a 6/6 or a 7/7 that has maybe some useful ability. That's a lot of weight on a 2-drop. Ultimately, you only paid 2 mana for the card. Yes. Sometimes you'll spend a bunch of mana to activate the ability and they'll kill it in response and you'll be out all that mana. But for the most part, it's a 2 mana 2/3 that later in the game becomes like a 6/6 or a 7/7 with cool abilities.
Yep.
Looks like a B+ to me. This is a very good card.
Yeah, me too. Ludovic Necrogenius gets a B+. It just, even though it's complicated, it doesn't ask that much of you. Old Stick Fingers is next. This is X. That's a great name. X black green for a star legendary creature horror. And it is a rare. When you cast this spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your graveyard, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Old Stick Fingers, power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard.
Not a huge fan of this one. So when you cast this, say, for 6 mana, right? Black, green, and then 4, X is 4. You're getting a 6 mana 4/4 minimum plus whatever other number of creatures that have died. But green, black doesn't have very many disturbed creatures. So you're not getting a ton of value intrinsically by putting the creatures in your graveyard. There are cards that care about that, of course. But what you're also doing is you are thinning your deck in the way that you don't want it to happen. Right. You're putting you're going through your deck and putting a bunch of creatures in your graveyard and then putting the rest on the bottom. So if the game goes long enough, that could matter. That's not the biggest deal. The biggest problem with this is that I think you're going to pay 5 or 6 mana and you're going to get like a 4/4 or 5/5, sometimes a 6/6
vanilla
that with no other abilities. So I think it's fine, but it's not a card I'm really actively looking at playing unless, if you're playing with Ghoulcaller's Harvest, which is another rare, of course, or have enough other payoffs for creatures in your graveyard, then sure, this card becomes pretty good because it directly puts 5 creatures in your graveyard. You could definitely do something with that. But you can't cast it to a high amount of mana. Like, how often is this going to be better than Colossal Dreadmaw? 6 mana, 6/6 trample.
Yeah, probably not very often.
And that card's not like fantastic. It's a fine card. No. This looks like a C. I mean, some decks will be able to bump it up to like almost a B if they really care about the synergies, but I think most decks are just not going to be. It's not going to be too sticky.
Yeah, Yeah. Okay, let's just go see on old stick fingers. Rite of Harmony is next. It's green-white for an instant at rare. It says whenever a creature or enchantment enters a battlefield under your control this turn, draw a card because this is an instant. And it has flashback for 2 green-white. No, I'm not doing this.
No, it's just too much. Like, in order to get a card out of this, you have to spend 2 plus whatever a creature whatever you spent on a creature. It does work with tokens. So if you could combine Rite of Harmony with Ghoul Color's Harvest, you can go nuts. But we're asking a lot. This looks like a build around F, where I don't think you're going to end up really utilizing this card.
It's a constructed build around at best. Which is an insult. Next is Siphon Insight. It is blue-black for an instant at rare. Look at the top 2 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down and put the other on the bottom of that library. You may look at and play the exiled card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast the spell. And here's the thing. Siphon Insight does have flashback as well, so you are going to get 2 cards out of it. It's 1 blue-black to flash it back.
I mean, the obvious comparison here is Think Twice, which is 1 in a blue, draw a card, flashback 2 in a blue. How often do you think that Siphon Insight's going to be better than Think Twice? Setting aside the fact that it's multicolor, that doesn't matter here.
I think it is better. I mean, you're getting the choice of 2 cards, so you have a better chance to hit a land if that's what you need, etc. So yeah, I think it's often going to be better. It's harder to cast, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Because again, we're talking limited here. In constructed, your decks have these very focused game plans. A blue-black control deck doesn't really want to play a card off the top of a mono-white aggro deck's library very often. But in limited, like, you're both just playing good creatures and removal spells. So this is just Think Twice with upside, which isn't like an amazing card, but it's certainly fine. Don't put a lot of value on the fact that you're getting one of their cards. That typically is not going to matter too much. In fact, it can be kind of a drawback, because imagine you Siphon Insight against a blue deck and you play a creature and then they bounce it, just goes back to them. So
that's right.
When in doubt, err on the side of not getting creatures against blue just because of that reason.
Also for Disturb, it'll go to their yard.
Yeah, etc. So yeah, you don't want Disturb or flashback cards. But overall, I mean, this is good card selection and card advantage. So I would give Siphon Insight a C+. Nice little card. Not really like a rare, but still a fine card.
Yeah, C+ for Siphon Insight. Plus, it will matter to your opponents, I think. What does Angel Fire Ignition do?
This one's nice. This is really get the engine started here. This is 1 red-white for a sorcery at rare. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. So
wow.
It gets, basically, because it gets Indestructible and Vigilance and Haste, you have to attack with it. There's like no reason not to. It's all upside. And then it even gets Trample and Lifelink. But here's the kicker. Well, or the flashback in this case. 2 red-white. You can flash this back. This card's incredible. I think this card's really good. Imagine you're playing against a red-white aggro deck and they cast this on like turn 6 on one of their 3/3s. And they're just like, all right, attack you with this 5/5 with 10 abilities, gain 5 life, you take 5, and then next turn they're going to flash it back and attack for 7.
Right.
And that's just with 1 3/3 out. Obviously, It can do a lot more.
And the critical thing here being that the counters stay, right? The other stuff you get until end of turn, but you are left with really what is the most important of these abilities, which is that your power and toughness is going up. That is sick.
I like A- on Angel Fire Ignition. I feel like this is going to be a real big grown test card when your opponent plays it. Like, even just in terms of what you get, a 2/2 Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Haste for 3 would be kind of interesting with flashback, right? If it was like a Sky Knight Legionnaire type creature. But the fact that you get to put the counters on your biggest creature most likely means that those abilities get that much stronger. Your Lifelink's now gaining them 6 or what have you.
Yeah, I think I want to go B, maybe a little higher on Angel Fire Ignition. And my reasoning is this. In order for me to get up into the A range for what is, you could call this an aura of sorts, right? It's a 3 mana sorcery speed thing that you're using to buff your creature. people do play ways to mess with your creature, right? Now this has flashback, so it's going to be really hard for them to have like both things both times. But if my first Angel Fire Ignition, my creature gets bounced out from under it, like that's pretty bad for me. It's a big tempo loss, and you know, they know that the other one's coming and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to go quite into A range for it, but there's a lot of power here, and it's a card I would never leave out of a deck that could cast it. So I would go B, maybe B+ for it.
Just try to think about not you putting it in your deck, but more your opponent casting it on you and beating you with it.
Oh, they're going to do that plenty. Don't worry.
All right.
Croaking Counterpart is next. It's 1 blue-green for a sorcery at rare. Create a token that's a copy of target non-frog creature, except it's a 1/1 green frog. Really? So you can copy anything except for that it's a 1/1 green frog, but it has whatever abilities it has. That's the joke. Because there's flashback on this, it's 3 green-blue.
So of note, you can copy their stuff, which normally you can't do with clones these days. Like they've steered away from that. But of course, this card has a lot going on. So I think it makes sense that they would let you do it. What you want to do with Croaking Counterpart is copy a creature that comes to play with counters, if there's such a thing. Copy a creature with like Death Touch could be pretty good.
Tap abilities.
Yeah, something, any sort of like activated ability can be strong. This card seems pretty hard to use. Also, like if you copy the front side of a werewolf, you can't flip it. There's nothing to transform into. But if you copy the backside, you get a 1/1 copy of the backside at least. It works with enter the battlefield abilities. Yeah. If you copy something with an enter the battlefield ability, you'll get that trigger. This card's really weird. I think it's good because a 3 mana that can get you the best abilities of a creature in play and then flash it back. It's gotta be worth a card. Like those two combined have to. Yes, those two combined have to be worth a card.
No way.
Like,
I think this is not worth a card.
You're not going to cut this in a blue-green deck. I don't think this is a great.
I am.
I really don't think that's the case. I think that you're gonna find enough uses for this. It's just so hard for it to completely miss.
And no, it's not. It's really not. So many of the good abilities that we care about augment power and toughness. Like every keyword ability. Like, okay, you got a 1/1 trampler. You got a 1/1 lifelink. Even a 1/1 flyer is like, you know, all of these things are so much worse being a 1/1 than, you know, anything bigger than that.
Yeah, there's just enough like ETB abilities in the set, and
that's
like
what it really keys
touchers.
On. And I think my gut is that there aren't, because of the werewolves, which generally don't have ETBs. They're more, you know, on board. But if that's true, what you said, that there are enough, then yeah, okay. You know, you could squeak out enough value from your Croaking Counterpart, but I'm pessimistic on it.
I think this card's going to be like a C.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm going to start with D on it. I mean,
I'm not really high on it, but I think this card's going to be good enough.
All right. I'm going to say D. And honestly, this is another one in that camp where I hope I'm wrong, because if I am, then this set's like a lot sweeter. Dire Strain Rampage is next. It's 1 red, green for sorcery. It's rare. It says destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. If a land was destroyed this way, its controller may search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Otherwise, its controller may search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle, and it has flashback for 3 green, red. Now.
So the main use of this is as a 3 mana ramp spell.
Right.
Because you blow up your own land, you go get 2 lands, and then later you can flash it back. And it has like some upside of, hey, if they have a really gnarly artifact or enchantment, you can blow that up too. The problem I have with ramp being multicolor is it misses out on the mana fixing element to a pretty big degree. Yeah. Like, yes, this does let you splash a 3rd color in your red-green deck, but part of the strength of rampant growth is that when you draw 2 forests and a rampant growth, you can go get your mountain and start casting your red spells. This requires both. This looks pretty bad to me. I'm going to guess that you're not going to play this very often. Looks like a D.
It looks like a D to me too. Dire Strain Rampage gets a D. It maybe even is just a sideboard card. Like,
I mean, Harrow is a good card, right?
Yes.
2 and a green, sack a land, go get 2 lands. The problem with Dire Strain Rampage is, it's multicolored. I just really think that's a pretty big drawback. I don't know. Maybe it's a little better, because Harrow, with the upside of being able to beast within their, their artifacts or enchantments, and then it also has flashback. It's not the worst.
I maybe I want to give it like a decent sideboard grade. Like this is not Harrow. Like there's two, it's not instant speed and the lands are tapped. I know that those aren't like the things that are really important about Harrow, but what you said which is that it's also gold. So we're kind of chipping away at it. Maybe we give it like a sideboard B.
I think it's probably like a sideboard B or a C- in like a 3-color ramp deck.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing 3 colors, you should probably play this.
Yeah, that's true. I'm assuming that this isn't a thing as much. But
if you're playing a high-end deck, a red-green big stuff deck, I would play this card. So this looks more like a C- to me than anything else.
Okay, there you go. Good luck with it. Florian Voldaren Scion is next. It is 1 black-red for a 3/3 legendary vampire noble at rare. It's got first strike, so 3 mana, 3/3 first strike. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, look at the top X card of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponents lost this turn. Exile one of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may play the exiled card this turn. So you hit them with just this, you get to exile the top 3 and you can play one of them. That's sweet. It's also
you can look at the top 3, exile 1, put the other 2 on the bottom. So you don't even lose the other cards. Yeah, no, this card's quite good. I mean, a 3/3 first strike for 3 would already be a B. This ability definitely is threatening, especially since what these color pair tends to do is make your opponent, take damage, and it has a lot of cards that can kind of work towards that plan. It's a little unfortunate that you only have this turn to play the card, because if you ever spend mana, like you cast Nightbird's Clutches or whatever, and to get through, you're not really going to have that much more mana to play the card. But you also can play lands off this. It does say play. Mm-hmm. So overall, the ability is a decent upside on top of a very good set of stats, which honestly looks kind of like an A- to me. Like a 3/3 first strike for 3 just brawls.
I just can't imagine a scarier card to hit on turn 3. Like if you don't have an answer or a blocker for this, like, this is the equivalent of a better version of like a thief or whatever they call them now, right? Like it hits you, you draw a card. It's like, this is hit you get the best card of your 3 and it gives you flexibility and you're going to hit your land drops. And how in the world this early, especially if your opponent's on the play, are you blocking Florian? It's 3/3 first strike. You're in black red. You have removal for cheap creatures all day in this set. Like this thing is going to hit you. So I like A- for Florian. It does lose a little luster later in the game, which is why, if there's 4/4s out or maybe werewolves have flipped or something like that, then the 3/3 isn't quite up to snuff. But in the, developing stage of the game, this card is like one of the better ones I've seen. So A- for Florian.
It also triggers off damage you've dealt, not just with Florian too.
Right.
So like if you have a Thermal Alchemist or something in this, you're just drawing a card every turn.
Well, and even if you just have a 2-drop and they don't.
Yeah,
although you can't really do anything with that card.
Yeah, it's gonna. Okay. That's not gonna work out so well. But yes, later in the game,
that one turn it won't. But like, let's say you start off with
Interloper,
right? Yeah. And then you play this hit. You don't use the cards, but the next turn you're going to hit with your Interloper, even if Florian doesn't get through. So
yeah,
pretty sweet. Next is Rem Corrales, Stalwart Slayer. This is 1 red-white for a 2/3 legendary human knight. At rare, it's got flying and haste. So 3 mana, 2/3 flying haste. Yes. If a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. So that's specifically referencing spells, right? So things that are on the stack effectively. If a spell would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +1 instead. Damn.
I mean, I'm already in for a 2/3 flying haste. It's a Sky Knight Legionnaire with upside.
Yeah.
Preventing their spell damage isn't going to come up too often, but when it does, it's really good because it's like, all right, well, I guess you have to bolt this guy first. And if they have like a 2 damage effect, and this is just blanking it because can't kill him, can't kill anything else. And then if you have your own burn spells, it also works. Basically, you're playing this card like 85% for the 2/3 flying haste for 3. But the extra upside on those 2 abilities does add up, and sometimes it will be kind of like the turning point for a game. So I like B+ for Rem Corrales, mostly on stats. But hey, the ability could come in handy.
That's what I was thinking too. B+ for Rem. Next is Slowgurk the Overslime. My God, that has to be front runner for best name of the set. 1 green blue for a legendary ooze. It's rare. It's a 3/3 trampler. So 3 mana, 3/3 trample. Again, these cards are already just good. Whenever a land card is put in your graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Slogurk. Remove 3 +1/+1 counters from Slogurk to return it to its owner's hand. And when Slogurk leaves the battlefield, return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Man, so it's like all the pieces are here except for he doesn't put any lands into your graveyard. So you have to do that part yourself.
Slogurk doesn't do any enabling, but obviously works quite well with self-mill. He'll pick up some +1/+1 counters, and then when he dies, you get those lands back. Getting lands back when he dies, I don't think is going to matter all that much, or it just leaves the battlefield. If you bounce him, you also get the lands back, just because by the time this goes away and you've milled a bunch of lands, how often do you care about getting 3 lands into your hand? Not that often, I wouldn't say. Like, it's not usually going to give you really relevant lands. But again, the floor of 3 mana, 3/3 trample is obviously pretty good. One thing to note with the remove 3 +1/+1 counters ability is that ability goes on the stack. So if Slogurk has 3 damage on it, and you use the ability, like it's a 6/6 Slogurk with 3 damage on it, and you use the ability, it's going to die before it returns to your hand. So
that's good.
Don't do that. But the way I would look at this card is you should always play it if you're blue-green. It would make me a little more likely to want like self-mill or discard style cards, but it's not such a huge payoff that I would like completely warp my deck to make that work. It's just more of a bonus. Again, it's kind of like Rem Corollas, slightly worse set of stats. I think 3/3 trample's pretty reasonably worse than 2/3 flying haste, but the abilities have upside and sometimes they'll come up. So looks like a B on Slogurk. Pretty solid card.
Yeah, I think so too. 3/3, the stat, it's similar to Rem, like you said, in the sense that it's kind of the stats that we like, and then there's some upside. Next is Tovolar, Dire Overlord. This is 1 green-red for a legendary human werewolf at a rare. This is a 3/3, so 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Nice. This is what we were talking about with Florian, where if you have one out on 2 and you play this and hit them, then you get the card. Now that's some business.
Except it actually works.
Except for it works. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more werewolves and or wolves, it becomes night. Then transform any number of human werewolves you control. And this does have daybound, by the way.
So by himself, Tovolar will start the nightbound, daybound cycle. But also, if you've assembled a pack, whether that be wolves or werewolves, Tovolar forces it to become night.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty cool. And then Tovolar transforms into Tovolar the Midnight Scourge, which is a legendary werewolf as a 4/4. And it has the same ability whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And then it also has an activated ability of green-red X. Target wolf or werewolf you control gets +X/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. My God.
Yeah,
Classic wolf run.
Yeah, it is pretty unreal. Even with no other werewolves, be a 3 mana 3/3 that flips into a 4/4 that can start pumping itself or other wolves or werewolves. And then when you have other wolves or werewolves, of course, it gets much, much better, especially if you can do some sort of curving into this, or even just getting 3, playing this and immediately flipping, on your next turn. Like your opponent is going to have to deal with this. So there's a little bit of a, this needs a pack to function aspect, even though it's very good by itself. By itself, if you knew you had no other werewolves in your deck or wolves, this would be a B. And once you're at like 4+ other wolves or werewolves, this probably moves up to like a A- or B+ level.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that this is an A in the set.
Yeah,
I just don't see how you get around that activated ability.
You don't. Mostly it's that you play a 3 mana 3/3 and they deal with it somehow. Like it doesn't have a big ETB. You do have to wait a bit, right? Like if you play Tovolar and you don't have 3 total, it's not going to flip. They're probably going to play a spell on your turn, so it's not going to flip. On your next turn, you then either play nothing to flip it or play up to 3 wolves or werewolves to flip it on your turn after that. So you're not getting the 4/4 version for likely a couple turns.
Okay.
Barring, this being your third werewolf as soon as you play it. But, your opponent is going to have something to say about that. I do think
A-?
I like A- overall in Tovolar, just in risk, that does respect him being in a pack with other wolves and werewolves by himself, I think is a little worse. Also, the Midnight Scourge, the flip side picture, looks like he's like short, stubby little legs.
It
so
kind of looks like a dog, like a like a mutt or something. That did not work out well. At any rate, A- for Tovolar. Next is Vadrik Astral Archmage. This is 1 blue-red for a 1/2 human wizard at rare. It's neither day nor night. If it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as Vadrik enters the battlefield. Where was that text last time? Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is Vadrik's power. And whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, you put a +1/+1 counter on Vadrik.
This is fine. It's a 3-mana 1/2 Goblin Electromancer, but then as like day and night start flipping, it gets bigger and bigger, and then obviously like starts giving you bigger cost reductions. But honestly, you're not going to get that much value out of it. Yes, it helps with flashback because those costs tend to be kind of expensive. So, you can reduce a 6 or 7 mana flashback card to like 5 mana, 4 mana if he's gotten some counters. But the way I look at a lot of these day cards that are outside of the werewolf colors is I think they're a little bit of a liability, where you play Vadrik and you start the day-night cycle, but if they're playing werewolves, that kind of plays into their hands, right?
Yes, it does. I don't know.
So,
this is an interesting card. Like, is the flavor that like as days go by, he gets stronger, he accumulates knowledge or whatever because he's like reading the sky.
He's studying, the sky and all that.
It's kind of cool.
One thing that is nice is his ability makes it easy to flip back and forth because spells are cheaper, so it's easy to play 2 a turn. And then if you're a deck full of instants and sorceries, you're more likely to have cards you can play on their turn, so you can pass and flip. Yeah, I think Vadrik probably gets like a C+ given all that.
That's what I was going to think too. I mean, the upside's not that high here, right? Like, I made a 3/4 or 4/5 or something like that. C+ for Vadrik. Next is Arlen the Pack's Hope. This is our first mythic. It's 2 red-green for a legendary Planeswalker Arlen, 4 loyalty. Only 2 abilities, but it does have a static, and it's daybound. So if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night the next turn. So that's just static on Arlen. Arlen's +1, so puts it at 5 loyalty on the turn it comes down. Until your next turn, you may cast creature spells as though they had flash, and each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Not great, right? You've already spent 4 mana on this. It's unlikely you'll have extra mana to cast on creatures. But you can -3 to create 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. So that puts Arlen down to just 1 loyalty, but you do get 2 2/2s, which is legit. Then, if it ever transforms to Nightbound, it becomes Arlen the Moon's Fury. And that's the same loyalty, 4 loyalty walker at base. It says +2, add green-red to your mana pool, or 0 until end of turn. Arlen becomes a 5/5 werewolf creature with trample, indestructible, and haste.
Lot of stuff going on here. One note is the loyalty state remains. Like if Arlen flips with 1 loyalty, the Nightbound side will also have 1 loyalty. That won't change because it's counters. And then the other is that I think the play pattern here is actually really strong. Let's say you play Arlen, it becomes day, right? Assuming nothing's happened in that realm. You -3 to make 2 2/2s. You have a 1 loyalty Arlen. Your opponent probably can't kill Arlen, right? No. If you've made 2 2/2s. Mm-hmm. And then on your next turn, you +1 Arlen and then pass the turn doing nothing. She then flips because you played nothing, but you still have the ability to play something at flash. Cool. Obviously, this is right how they drew it up. And then you flash something into play, and then next turn you 0 Arlen and attack with the wolves plus what you flashed into play plus a 5/5 trample indestructible haste. And from there you can decide if you want to play some spells to flip it or not flip it or what have you. So
that's dope.
Yeah, this is powerful stuff. There's going to be some boards where your opponent has a 2/2 flyer and you're looking at Arlen. It's like, this isn't great, but you can still play it and +1 it and start making some moves. But sometimes your opponent's going to play this on turn 4 and you're just going to want to concede the game.
Yes, for sure.
They're going to make 2 wolves. You have a 2/2 in play. They're going to make 2 wolves and you're going to be like, well, I guess that's it. So I would give Arlen an A. I mean, there's just enough times when this is going to be overwhelmingly great that I think it's worth it. Plus, if it's ever night already, you can just play this as a 5/5 trample indestructible haste that has 4 loyalty.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a 0. And then if they can't kill it, you've got 2 turns worth of attacks. That's a lot.
They're probably dead. Wow, I didn't even think about that. Of course, that's a huge part of it. And, your worst case, right, is 4 mana, make 2/2 wolves, 2/2/2 wolves, and then she soaks up a couple of damage, gain a couple life or whatever. That already would be totally fine. So I like A for Arlen.
Yeah, I mean, two red-green sorcery, put 2/2/2 wolves into play is reasonable. And if it came alongside gain 2 life, you'd be like, I'm pretty happy to play this card. This is much, much more than that.
Much, much more. So A for Arlen. Next is Sigarda, Champion of Light, and you bet this is also a mythic. This is 1 green, white for a 4/4 legendary creature angel with flying and trample, and it pumps up your humans. They all get +1/+1, and it has Coven. Whenever it attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Dang.
It's funny when you look at some of these gold cards and you're like, well, I'm in for this already. We've actually said this a number of times where it's like 4 mana, 4/4 flying trample. All right, I guess I'm in. And then it's got some other abilities too. I like this a lot, of course. In a green-white deck, you're going to end up with plenty of humans. So the static ability of humans you control get +1/+1 is going to be good. Means you can place a guard and immediately get some good attacks in. And then if you ever have Coven, which shouldn't be that hard given you've got a 4/4 already, all you have to have is a couple humans or a couple other creatures in play. You get to attack and maybe draw a human. So looks like an A to me. I mean, it's a 4 mana 4/4 flying trample. Not the easiest casting cost. White, green has some requirements, but in a 2-color deck, just not that hard to do this on turn 4 or 5 most of the time.
Looks like an A to me. A for Sigarda, Champion of Light. Next is Teferi, Who Slows the Sunset. Oh, Teferi. It's
Teferi.
It's just Teferi. 2 white, blue for a legendary Planeswalker Teferi. At Mythic, it's 4 loyalty. And the +1 is, oh boy, this is small. Choose up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target land. Untap the chosen permanents you control. Tap the chosen permanents you don't control, and you gain 2 life. Kind of weird. -2, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. But that's the -2 off of 4, so that's pretty rough. And then the ultimate is -7. You get an emblem with untap all permanents you control during each opponent's untap step, and you draw a card during each opponent's draw step.
I'm not too high on Teferi here.
Yeah.
Teferi's had his time in the sun or in this case, the sunset. So I can't feel too bad for him given the 3-drop and 5-drop Teferis are among the best planeswalkers of all time. This one is not, because the +1 ability, it doesn't lock it down for a turn like some other planeswalkers we've seen, like Tamiyo or Johnny or what have you. They'll just untap on their turn. So this Teferi doesn't really have an ability that protects him. Yes, you can untap your own creature, so you could attack and block, but that requires a creature to protect Teferi. By himself, you play him, go up to 5 loyalty, and just kind of hope they don't kill him. -2 to get a strategic planning or whatever, impulse for 3 is just fine. I mean, it is draw a card with selection, but you look at those together and it's yes, Teferi's a good card if their opponent can't pressure them, but just every planeswalker is that. Compared Teferi to some of the other planeswalkers that we tend to give high grades to, they can protect themselves or generate a good amount of advantage, whether it be board or card, right away. Teferi, a lot of times you'll play Teferi -2 and then they'll find a way to kill it. And if they don't, then next turn you get to tick it up to 3 and do some untapping, gain some life. But most of the time, Teferi is going to be at its best when you already have a board advantage, which that's not really what I look for out of a mythic rare planeswalker. That being said, I would never cut this in a blue-white deck. I mean, it is a good card. It does threaten to run away with the game if the opponent can't kill it. So I'm going to give Teferi a B-. I think it's still going to have some games where you're on the play and you have a creature in play and you play this and you're able to just protect Teferi, and your opponent's now in this sub-game of how can I kill the Teferi, and they can't, and you're drawing extra cards, or you're just racing up to the emblem or what have you. But Yeah, it's not gonna get you out of games where you're behind for the most part.
Yeah, I like B- on Teferi as well. Just mediocre for a Planeswalker, but still a good card. Next is Liesa, Forgotten Archangel. This is 2 white, black for a 4/5 flying lifelink. Ding! This one is just a regular rare. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Holy smokes. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Wow, I was kind of waiting for the downside here, and it never came. That is absurd. That's not a mythic? Wow.
Yeah, it's just a really good rare. I mean, 4/5 flying lifelink, which says you can't kill my other creatures, and also, just as a byproduct, exiles their creatures when they would die instead. So it gets around their disturb or graveyard stuff nicely. A for Liesa.
Yeah, I might even go A+.
Pretty close to an A+. If you can play this and attack with your 2 creatures, they can't really trade them, right? So they have to kind of take it. And if they don't kill it, obviously it's a 4/5 flying lifelink. Yeah, I'm down for A+ on Liesa. There's no real downside here.
Right. I also tend to think of if I'm really far behind, what's the type of card I can top deck that can win me the game? Yeah. And this does that. Yeah. So I like A+ for Liesa. That's awesome. And then our last gold card is Wake to Slaughter. This is 3 black-red for a sorcery at rare. It says, choose up to 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. An opponent chooses one of them. Return that card to your hand. Return the other to the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. And you bet it has flashback. It costs 6 to flash it back for black-red.
So this card's pretty funny. So you can, if you want, you can choose just one creature, and then they have to return that creature to your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got, let's say, some sort of, let's say Liesa, you're playing 3 colors, whatever,
yeah,
and you really want Liesa back in your hand, you can just cast this, choose Liesa. They have to put it back in your hand. But most of the time you are going to want to choose 2 because you're giving up value if you don't. But then it's kind of funny. So imagine if you choose 2 3/3s, obviously they just put the weaker one in your hand, put 1 into play, and you get to hit them for 3. But it gets more interesting when you choose a creature with the enters the battlefield ability, or if you choose a 5/5 and a 2/2, it's well, I don't want to give them the 5/5 permanently, but that means I'll be getting hit for 5 this turn. So, and then of course it has flashback. So it's a 2-for-1 no matter what, but it also has upside where you might get a couple big haste hits in. Really cool card. I think I haven't really seen a card exactly like this before. I really like the art too. The moon in the background really sells it for me. So I would give Wake to Slaughter, I think, a B. It's kind of expensive. You're not actually putting anything on the board. If you cast this on turn 5, at the end of that turn, you're not going to have any creatures in play.
Yeah.
So you have to keep that in mind. But if you have a good selection of creatures, then this card is going to get you a 2-for-1 plus extra damage. And if you can really kind of put the screws on them, if you've got some good creatures that with enters the battlefield effects that they really don't want to put into play.
Yeah, I want to give Wake to Slaughter a C. I think the mana considerations are just really tough. It's gold and also expensive. It's 5 mana, then 6 mana. And that's just a heck of a lot, for a raised dead effect. The other part's nice, though. I mean, that's legit. Getting the thing on the battlefield, even for just a turn, can be really important, too. I also like the sub game with the opponent. That's kind of fun. But of course, they're going to give you the worst option, for you. So I'd say C on Wake to Slaughter. I just think it's really slow.
Yeah, that's fair.
How's a brisket?
It's time for me to go wrap one of the 2 briskets. So.
All right. How long is it going to take?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I wonder how many cards I can get through in
5 or less. All right. Well, I'm going to go risk it for the brisket, and you can keep on going.
Okay. We're going to start with white. This is, and by the way, this is great because I get to give Luis, I'm giving grades on behalf of Luis as well. This is Curse of Silence. This is white for an enchantment. It's an aura curse at rare. It says enchant player. As Curse of Silence enters the battlefield, choose a card name. Spells with the chosen name enchanted player cast costs 2 more to cast. And whenever enchanted player casts a spell of the chosen name, you may sacrifice Curse of Silence. If you do, draw a card. Curses are cool. They enchant players and then they affect that player. This one is not cool or good. And I know that Luis would give it an F, and I'm also going to give it an F. even under any circumstance where you feel that your opponent has some bomb or whatever, this does not do enough to warrant inclusion in your deck, even if you get the card back eventually at the end. There's too many games where you cast Curse of Silence and they just don't draw the card that you care about anyway, and you're just straight up down a card and doing nothing. So F for both of us for Curse of Silence with a high degree of confidence. Next is Fateful Absence. This is 1 and a white for an instant. It's rare. It says destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller investigates, so they get a clue token with the ability of 2, sacrifice it to draw a card. So basically, you're getting unconditional instant speed removal, which is really, really strong. 1 and a white, destroy anything, even planeswalkers, of which, we did cover a couple of those, but they get the card back. So you're basically downgrading whatever they had on board to a 2-mana investment into a card. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to play this card. Fateful Absence is a type of card that I'm not cutting from my white decks. It is, one way to look at it would be they invest 5 mana in a creature, and then +2 for the clue to get the card back. So let's say that they're 7 mana deep. I'm only 2 mana in. We are equal on cards, but they have to draw a card off the top of their library. How much worse on that is on average is like a 5-drop that they've already got on the battlefield. It's a lot worse. I mean, they could just get a land off of it, in which case you probably don't care that much. And the average card in their deck is probably worse. Now, if you have to use this on their cheap stuff, it does get a little bit worse. But I would basically play Fateful Absence every time. It doesn't quite get that premium mode because the card does matter, right? But at the same time, this is a worthy inclusion in the deck. I would say Fateful Absence is like a B. I think Luis would probably give it that grade as well. We'll ask him when he comes back. Next is Intrepid Adversary. This is 1 and a white for a mythic rare human scout. It's a 3/1 with lifelink. So already pretty strong there. If it ever gets to hit even once, that life swing is really, really big. Then it says, when Intrepid Adversary enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many Valor counters on Intrepid Adversary. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each Valor counter on Intrepid Adversary. Luis, we got a real nice one here. Intrepid Adversary, I just read it, and it is dope.
Man, you kind of got to give me with that Curse of Silence, too.
Yeah, the Curse of Silence was just FF for both. What grade would you give Fateful Absence?
I'll give it a B.
Yeah, that's what I gave. I gave it a B on your behalf.
Nice. All right.
And I gave Curse an F, so I'm 2 for 2. Now, what about Intrepid Adversary?
Intrepid Adversary has a bit of danger to it because you're going to play it. Let's say you play it for 6 mana, right? So it's like a 5/3 lifelink, but all your creatures are getting +1/+, or +2/+2. You then are going to make attacks and blocks kind of based on that. And if your opponent has a kill spell or a bounce spell, you could kind of be left holding the bag.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's a 2-mana 3/1 lifelink with like almost infinite upside, where you can for every creature you have in play, every time you spend 2 mana, you're adding a ton of stats to the board.
It even counts itself, right? It's a 5/3 lifelink. If you pay 6
if you cast it for 6 mana, it's a 5/3 lifelink that's giving all your creatures +2/+2. I would give it an A-.
Yeah,
I think it's quite strong. You are going to get blown out sometimes. It's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, I feel that the 4 mana spot is going to be nice, right? Like that's a really, like everything gets +1/+1. You get a 4/2 lifelink for 4. Life is good. Like you said, it is fragile. A- for Intrepid Adversary. Next is Sun Gold Sentinel. This is 1 and a white for a human soldier. It's rare. It's a 3/2. And it says, whenever it enters a battlefield or attacks, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. And it has Coven. You can pay 1 and a white and choose a color. Sun Gold Sentinel gains hexproof from that color until end of turn and can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn, but you can only activate it if you have Coven.
One big difference between this and like protection, it's obviously got some comparisons, is this doesn't help it in combat once it's already blocked or been blocked.
That's nice. That's a really good compromise, isn't it?
So you can make it so, yeah, they can't block it with black creatures, but there's no more like, oh, okay, block your attacking black creature, give this protection. So basically, this is a 2-mana 3/2 that can like kind of mess with their graveyard, and then later it can dodge removal spells and dodge past blockers if you have Coven. The Coven part kind of lines up nicely when you actually want to be using this. You're probably not spending 2 mana to activate it until, pretty late in the game. So you should likely have Coven by then. Yeah, this is a good card. Good early, good late. Has some cool abilities. Probably give it a B.
Yeah, I like B for Sun Gold Sentinel, and I like the implementation of semi-protection here, even though it is a little clunky, words-wise. Next is Adeline Resplendent Cathar. 1 white for a star 4 legendary human knight at rare. And she's got vigilance, and her power is equal to the number of creatures you control. So 1/4 to start with just for her, and then go from there. Whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So for our purposes, whenever it attacks, you get a 1/1 white human creature tapped and attacking.
Well, whenever you attack. So it doesn't even actually have to be this creature specifically. Yeah.
Oh, so you don't actually have to risk this card in combat to get that extra ability.
I mean, imagine the scenario we keep talking about. You play a 2 mana 2/2. They don't have a play. Turn 3, you play this, attack them. You now hit them with a 2/2 and a 1/1. This is a 3/4. Next turn, it's probably attacking as like a 5/4. You're getting a second token. This card can run away with the game early, and it's still good late, because late it's going to be like a 3 mana 6/4 that puts a little dork into play. The dork being attacking does mean it's often going to die. Like you attack with this into a 2/2, they're just going to block the 1/1 and take some damage. But obviously, it's still a lot of upside for a 3 mana X4. Right. And yeah, Adeline Resplendent Cathar looks awesome. I would give Adeline an A- just for stats, plus the fact that it can really press on an aggressive start. And overall, you're just not paying that much for all these abilities.
Yeah, I definitely like A- for Adeline. That card's dope. What does Sigarda's Splendor do?
It says 2 white for an enchantment at rare. As it enters the battlefield, note your life total.
God, that's clunky.
At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if your life total is greater than or equal to the last noted life total, and then note your life total again. So a big key part is equal to. If you play this when you're at 20 and then they don't deal damage to you, on your next turn, you draw a card. And it also has, whenever you cast a white spell, you gain a life. So the way to look at this card is, if you can protect yourself, then you draw an extra card every turn. And if you can trigger this once or twice, at that point, I'm assuming you have the resources plus white spells to, gain life and or protect yourself. So it's a little bit snowbally in the direction of, if you're doing a good job defending yourself, this really pays you off. If you're getting beaten down, this card does absolutely nothing.
I really don't like this design space, Luis.
Yeah, you're not saying it's weak, because it's not a weak card. You're saying it rewards you for winning.
Right. And also, I don't like having to write things down all the time. Like, hey, noting your life total. All that, it's like, well, I wrote down 17, but you weren't at 7. It's like, I don't like introducing that as an extra thing. That said, I mean, how good is this card? I don't really know.
I think it's a build around card for like a controlling / defensive deck. And I think I would give it a build around B. Like if you can go, if you can play like, the Beloved Beggar, like the 0/4 into another creature into this on 4, and they can't hit you and you draw an extra card. At that point, you're going to play another white spell. You're going to gain another life. You're going to play another blocker. Maybe you're going to play Candle Trap. Like Candle Trap with this card is amazing. A 1 mana spell that gains you a life and stops their best attacker.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of upside here, but you will draw this card and have it do, basically nothing. So I would give Sigarda's Splendor a build around B. I could even see it in aggro decks, because in an aggro deck against a control deck, it's also insanely punishing. Okay. Imagine you're playing blue-black control and your aggro opponent goes like creature into Splendor. You're like, I'm not in a position to attack you, so if I attack you, you're going to attack me back. I don't know. Maybe it's just a B. It's just, there's a lot of situations where I could see it being good. There's obviously a lot of downside to it where, again, when you're losing, it's really not going to help you. But when you're winning or at parity, this card is a huge threat.
Yeah, I just devalue those. If my opponent plays 2-drop, 3-drop, and I'm planning on playing Sigarda's Splendor on my turn, it's just like it's over, right? So I don't think this card's very good. I really don't put a lot of value on cards that help me win when I'm already winning. I don't think that's
well. It's not even just winning though. I think it's when you have board presence.
Yeah,
there's a lot of games where you're not getting damage through, where this card is going to be really good. So I wouldn't say you were winning, but they also maybe can't get damage through.
Okay, plus so it's good at parity.
White spell gain a life that adds up too.
It does add up. It's just tough that this costs 4.
Yeah,
I want to give it like a D. I I need to see this thing perform against a host of different decks and situations before I'm going to be on board.
All right. Well, you're giving it a D. I'm giving it a B. This is fly all over again. We'll see where we end up.
Here we go. Enduring Angel is next. It's 2 white, white, white for a 3/3 Angel at Mythic Rare. It's got flying and double strike. It gives you hexproof, like you, the player, so you can't be cursed or whatever. And then it says, if your life total would be reduced to 0 or less, instead transform Enduring Angel and your life total becomes 3. Then, if Enduring Angel didn't transform this way, you lose the game. Okay, so let's transform it. It's Angelic Enforcer. Flying. You have hexproof. It's a star, and its power and toughness are each equal to your life total. So ostensibly it becomes a 3/3 flyer. And then whenever it attacks, you double your life total.
Yeah, this card's quite strong.
Dang, that's cool.
It's pretty funny where it's a 5-mana 3/3 flying double strike, which is obviously like that hits pretty hard. Triple white's not the easiest. But what it says is if your opponent can't remove this, they really can't kill you. There's going to be some decks that it's going to be really hard for them to beat this, right? Because they can try to kill you, right? And then all of a sudden you get a 3/3 Angel. Presumably they killed you during their attack step, so they don't get another attack step after. Then on your turn, you've got that 3/3 Angel that will attack double your life total 6. Now they're getting attacked by a 6/6 Angel, and then you're at 6, and this is no longer protecting you. But if you can keep yourself from dying, and this attacks again, that's a ton of damage. Plus you've gained a much more life. Also, if the turn this flips, you then on your turn cast a life gain spell, then you attack and double again. Like that's going to be really, really strong. Like imagine you gain 2 life and then attacked with this, and now you go from 5 to 10. And then you're kind of out of reach, right? And how do you race this thing?
And it's hard to imagine any game where you've had Enduring Angel or Angelic Enforcer on the battlefield attacking for any number of turns where the game just hasn't ended. I mean,
yeah. That said, at the end of the day, it is a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. There's a lot of cards that can deal with 5-mana 3/3 flyers.
True.
So,
and them killing it just kills it, right? That's that. So,
and all the weird text about if it didn't transform, you lose is so if you like copy Enduring Angel with like a clone effect, like the frog clone, it would trigger, say you don't lose the game, but then it wouldn't transform and then make you lose the game.
I see. So that's just to cover that base. Okay.
Right.
Still really powerful. I mean, this has got to be in the B+ A- range. It is a absolute must kill that has a relevant side.
My guess is A- because some of the kill spells, like, blue or white spells that like Candle Trap, if they don't have Coven or Locked in the Cemetery, are just not really going to solve their problem all that much. I mean, I guess they do kind of delay it. It doesn't answer the. They eventually can't kill you even if they've done that. But either way, I think this is an A-. And against some decks, it'll be nigh unbeatable. And against some decks, they'll be able to handle it.
They'll kill it. Yep. All right. So A- for Enduring Angel. Looks like a bomb. Next is Sigardian Savior. This is 3 white, white for a 3/3 flying angel. This one's also mythic. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return up to 2 target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Awesome card.
Wow.
It does push on you to draft a bunch of 2-drops, but 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer that brings 2 other creatures with it. I mean, even if you only get 1, you paid 5 mana for 5/5 plus worth of stats, 3/3 of which are flying.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think this card's an A. You do have to do a little bit of building around, but this is going to play like a big Siege Gang commander, a Cloud Goat Ranger. Yeah. Like you cast this on turn 5 and bring back 2 of your creatures that you played earlier. It's just going to feel wildly unfair.
Yeah, totally. I agree. You do have the setup costs associated with it, but it's in that A range where it can be a complete. This has also got to be one of the best top decks you could hit, right? Like it's just like, oh, I'm behind, and then you draw this, and it's like, hey, I'm ahead. So yeah, we'll go A for Sigardian Savior. Last one is last white card is called Vanquish the Horde, and it's 8 mana. It's 6 white, white for a sorcery at rare. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and what does it do? It destroys all creatures. The big reset button.
Yeah, the White Blasphemous Act, which from original Innistrad, where it gets cheaper the more things are around. It's interesting. It's good. It's cheap when it would be at its best, right? When your opponent has 5 creatures in play, you're like, bam, 3 mana.
Yeah.
But your opponent also has a bit of control over this if they're thinking about this card, where if they decide not to commit 1 extra card, maybe they have 2 creatures in play and this costs, 6 mana and you're not going to be on 5 mana and they don't play another creature. You kind of end up where you can't cast it. I do think this is going to be good when you want a Wrath and kind of bad when a Wrath wouldn't be that good, which makes it good. It's good in the situation where the effect is, it's cheap when the effect is good and expensive when the effect is bad. It kind of lines up to where you want. So
yeah, the only use case that you miss out on is kind of just a classic 2-for-1 off of a 4-mana Wrath, right? Where like they cast 2 creatures and you go Wrath to just clear away those 2 and just, move on with your life. That isn't a thing with this.
Yeah, but you also will, on the flip side, it'll open the door for casting this for like 2 mana and then casting like a creature or 2 in the late game.
Very
right?
true.
When they have 4 creatures and you have 2 creatures and you're just like, all right, spend 2 mana, Vanquish the Horde, play a 4-drop.
Yeah, so, I like that.
I would give Vanquish the Horde a B. I think it's going to be a pretty solid card. It is not as good in an aggro deck, so you kind of keep that in mind, but still a strong card.
All right, B for Vanquish the Horde. Nice little sweeper there. That moves us to blue. Our first card is called Malevolent Hermit. This is 1 and a blue for a human wizard at rare. It's a 2/1, and you can pay blue and sacrifice it to counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. Did you see that people were sending this to Kai?
Oh yeah, because Kai's invitational card, Kai Bud, is a Void Mage Prodigy, which is a 2/1 that you could sack a wizard to counter target spell.
Yeah, and this is the grumpy old man version of that, which is also somewhat in line.
There's an argument as to which art is least flattering because neither is particularly, but
one of them is more accurate than the other. This card also has Disturb. So for 2 and a blue, you can cast it from your graveyard transformed as Benevolent Geist. This is a 2/2 flyer. It's a spirit wizard. It says non-creature spells you control can't be countered. Okay. And it says if Benevolent Geist would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, you exile it instead, like is true for all the Disturb cards.
Oh, very strong card. 2 mana, 2/1 that flashes back for a 3 mana 2/2 flyer. Even without abilities, I'm looking at a B. Yeah. And then the ability to counter a non-creature spell unless the controller pays 3 is pretty good because A, it makes it so you can counter most of their non-creature spells if you leave mana up. It's kind of hard to pay an additional 3. And B, that just gets this in the graveyard faster for Disturb. You don't really have to rely as much on combat for Malevolent Hermit to go to the graveyard. So I like B+ on Malevolent Hermit. Just a good card.
Me too. B+. The most common use case is going to be play it as a 2/1, trade it off for some attacking creature, and then flash it back to get it a 2/2 flyer with some marginal upside. That's a totally fine card right there. So B+ for Malevolent Hermit. Next is Spectral Adversary. This is 1 and a blue for a spirit. It's a 2/1 flash flying and mythic. And it says when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a blue any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on Spectral Adversary, then up to that many other target artifacts, creatures, and or enchantments phase out.
So let me explain what phasing does. And this is a mechanic I actually know, so don't worry. It's an old mechanic from Mirage. It's kind of weird that they brought it back, but this is kind of how they do things these days. You see a phasing card in almost every set at this point, or every other set. So when you phase out a card, it's kind of treated as if it's not in play. Like you can't attack, block if it can't target it. It's not there. But it keeps its auras. It keeps its +1/+1 counters. It returns to play at the beginning of its controller's next turn. So you phase out, let's say you play this and phase out their blocker and attack past it. On their next turn, it'll come back and then they'll have it play again and it can attack and block, etc. Like there's no summoning sickness. And it doesn't trigger enter the battlefield abilities when it comes back because it kind of never left play. It's like it's in play but can't do anything.
Yeah, it's the clunkiest elegant solution, right? It does fill a need in the game. Like you don't want to have to untransform all werewolves. You don't want to have to move all the counters and all the equipment and all the stuff. But it does require kind of a mouthful to get it to work.
So in any case, what this is, Spectral Adversary, it's a 2 mana 2/1 flash flying to start with, which is good. You'd always play that. You can pay 1 blue any number of times, so it gets bigger and bigger. So it's 4 mana 3/2 or 6 mana 4/3. But then you can phase out other creatures or enchantments or artifacts, which adds a couple things. One, you can phase out one of your things in response to a removal spell. That will fizzle it. You can, like I said before, remove blockers. You can also go block, and then phase out my 2 blockers as to get like kind of like a double chump block action. pretty flexible card, and of course the base is pretty good. So a B plus on Spectral Adversary. Does a lot of different things. Kind of a weird card, and don't hold this too long. You're not really getting that paid off by playing this for like 8 mana. Just kind of play it when your mana dictates you should play it for the most part.
If your opponent attacks you with some 6/6 trampler or whatever, you can just pay 4, right, to just phase it out.
Yep.
So you
play
don't
this,
take
phase
any
it
damage.
out, don't take any damage.
Same thing if they target it with a combat trick or something like that. You can hold this back. That's really good. I mean, and also you're just getting a huge flyer as it scales 3/2, 4/3 flyer. What do you want to give it?
I like B plus on Spectral Adversary. Yeah. It's a good card.
It's right in that range. You're not going to get cards off of it very often, but combat trick's an exception to that. B plus for Spectral Adversary. Next is Triskaidekaphile. Man, I just shudder when I hear these. I remember Triskaidekaphobia, and I made some videos, and I put it in my deck, and I lost to it my own Triskaidekaphobia twice, like back-to-back weeks I did this. So it's like, just be easy on me here, Triskaidekaphile. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human wizard at rare. It says you have no maximum hand size. Who cares? At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game, and you can pay 3 and a blue to draw a card. Come on, Triskaidekaphile.
I mean, you can straight up ignore the first 2 abilities because hand size doesn't matter, and 13 cards is just not going to happen, really.
Right.
But 2 mana for a 1/3 with the activated ability of 4 to draw a card, that's pretty sweet. Like, unlike the Arcane Investigator that costs 6 to draw a card in AFR, 4 is a lot different. You end up being able to play this and then use the ability plus play something else. Like on turn 6, you can play a 2-drop plus use the ability, double use it on turn 8, and then untap and cast all your cards. I think this card is quite strong because it's just a 2 mana 1/3 with a really strong ability. If your opponent plays this on turn 2, what's the first thing you think?
I want to kill it before they get to turn 4.
Exactly. That it's going to put them under that kind of pressure.
Yeah. And
you didn't really invest much into that. So I like B plus for Triskaidekaphile.
Same. That's awesome. Yeah, I actually just really like cards like this too. Patrician Geist is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Spirit Knight. It's rare. It's got flying. So 3 mana 2/2 flyer that gives other spirits you control +1/+1, and spells you cast from your graveyard cost 1 less to cast. Nice. Yeah. Good little package there.
So solid bit of stuff that really goes along with the blue-white theme. You see other spirits out of your disturbed creatures. Also casting those disturbed creatures out of the graveyard cost less, and it's a 3 mana 2/2 flyer. Solid B for Patrician Geist, and sometimes it'll overperform, but most of the time just look at it like a Windrake with upside. Yeah,
good solid B for Patrician Geist. Next is Poppet Stitcher. This is 2 and a blue for a human wizard at Mythic Rare. It is a 2/3. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more creature tokens, you may transform Poppet Stitcher, which becomes Poppet Factory, which is an artifact. So it goes from creature to artifact. Creature tokens you control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3. I see what you did there, Poppet Factory. And then it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may transform it.
I really like Poppet Stitcher.
So it actually upgrades them?
Yeah. Well, how this is going to play is a little bit like Monastery Mentor. So what you're going to want to do with Poppet Stitcher is you cast this as a 3 mana 2/3. You start casting your instants and sorceries and making your tokens, and you just don't do anything with the tokens.
Right.
And then once you build up to 3, and also the tokens that can flip this can be tokens from anything. Mm-hmm. So if you control 3 or more creature tokens, even if you got them from other cards or other sources, whatever, this will still see them as tokens. And then once you flip it into the Poppet Factory, they all just become 3/3s and they lose their abilities, so they no longer have Decayed.
Right. So, it's funny because they get upgraded by losing abilities.
Right. I mean, imagine if you flip this with 3 Decayed tokens. Now you have 3 3/3s that can just attack and block at will.
It's great.
And then it even has a buyout clause where if you lose all those tokens, you can transform Poppet Factory back into Poppet Stitcher and shut down the factory for a bit to keep going. So I think Poppet Stitcher is great. I mean, there's also a lot of ways to make tokens already. And imagine you just play this on turn 3. On turn 4, you cast the 3 and a blue, the Revenge of the Drowned card or whatever, 3 and a blue to time ebb their creature and make a Decayed token. This also triggers, you get a second token. You're just so close to already flipping this card.
Yeah, that Poppet Stitcher seems really cool. The only gripe I have with it is that there's a magic card that's an artifact called Poppet Factory that doesn't make tokens.
Yeah,
it's just a static ability thing. It doesn't like actually factory anything.
It turns the zombies into puppets is the thing.
I see. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Anyway, I really like the card. Even without the factory part of it, these zombies will add up if you can pump them or sacrifice them. They're, we've talked about that a lot. I would say B+ for Poppet Stitcher.
I'm going to give Poppet Stitcher an A-. I think that in a deck with a lot of spells, if you play this, your opponent, if they don't kill it, they're going to lose the game pretty quickly.
Yeah, the reason why I'm giving it a little lower grade is that I'm having a hard time imagining the deck that's like zombie-centric, but also has enough spells to make this just like sort of an instant flip or an easy flip. Like it's kind of pushing and pulling on a few different things. But whatever, we're splitting hairs anyway.
Yeah, I don't even think that's how I would look at it, because all you need to do is care about spells. You don't need to care about zombies specifically. If you just put this in a spells deck, it's going to be incredible. Like you don't have. Okay. It's not like it's
like you're actually picturing this in blue-red.
Yeah, but I think it'd be good in almost any blue deck, just because there's so many spells already in blue that you want to play. Like this plus consider. You go like turn 4 this, cast consider. The opt cantrip thing, untap, cast another spell. Like you're already basically there.
Okay. Well, I think I'm just viewing the setup cost as a little steeper than you, but I'll go B+ on Poppets. I mean, it's awesome. Like I'm a big fan. Grafted Identity is next. It's 2 blue for an enchantment or at rare. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you sack a creature. It enchants a creature. You control enchanted creature, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1.
I mean, even adding this cost to a control magic is still a control magic, like mind control. And
especially in this color with all these stupid
gets
decays things.
So many free tokens.
Yeah.
I think it's still just an A. Like,
I do too.
You're just going to cast this card. Plus doesn't that look like Nick Cage / John Travolta from Face Off?
Oh like my God, it totally does.
That can't be an accident, right?
How did that happen?
It's literally Face Off. That's them.
It is Face Off. Oh my God. Wow. That is, yeah. All right. A for Grafted Identity. Sacrifice one of your stupid decayed zombies and profit. Memory Deluge is next. It's 2 blue for an instant at rare. It says, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then it has flashback for 5 blue.
I mean, if you like Behold the Multiverse, this is Behold the Multiverse for 4. Essentially, it's actually even better, because looking at the top 4 means you actually get to see all 4 cards before deciding which ones you want. But then it also flashes back as like a dig through time. So,
okay, well, that sounds perhaps a bit expensive, but powerful.
I mean, all you need to do is, if you have Memory Deluge in your deck and you draw it in a game, your new plan is just don't die and cast it for 7 mana, and then you probably win. And even if you never get to the point where you cast it for 7, it's not like paying 4 mana to look at 4 cards, choose 2 of them, and put them in your hand is that bad of a deal. Like, you would probably put a 4 mana, look at the top 4, pick 2 card into your deck in most circumstances, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this card gets a B+. I think it is. Okay. It's pretty strong. It's the kind of card that it will make a control deck just have its late game all locked up in one card.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that too. B+ for Memory Deluge. Like, you can't run too many of these type of cards, but this is a premium version of it. Curse of Surveillance is next. It's 4 and a blue for an enchantment. It's an aura curse, so it's rare. It enchants a player, as curses tend to do. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, any number of target players other than that player each draw cards equal to the number of curses attached to that player. So I curse you, but I get a card on your upkeep every turn?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good card.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's expensive, but it's going to add up.
You have to take a turn off, but once you take that turn off, you are going to win the game if you don't die pretty quickly.
Right.
Just 2 cards a turn is a lot. You can't turn it off, so make sure you can actually finish them. But still, drawing 2 cards a turn is so good. I would give a B+ to Curse of Surveillance as well.
Yeah, I like B for it. I mean, it doesn't affect the board. If you're behind it, it stinks. But there's so many cases where you can just sort of scrap together a board state that isn't letting you die. You cast this, it's 5 mana. You get a card back effectively right away. Like, by the time your next turn comes, you've already gotten a card, so you're equal you're not down a card anymore. And then from that point, you can sort of go, okay, literally the whole entire game revolves around me just not dying. Like if I can just block, trade, kill, bounce, just get anything so that I'm not dying in the next 2 turns, the curse is going to take over for you. I love cards like this too, because they kind of change the nature of the game into a more narrow, viewpoint where you're just like, it's a mini game now where all I have to do is just survive and this curse will take over the game for me. So you said B+, is that what you said?
I like B+ because you can even cast this on turn 5, take 5 damage on that turn.
Yeah.
And then next turn, like imagine there's multiple, bounce spells in the set, common and uncommon, right? Imagine next turn you play like the 1 or 2 mana bounce spell. Like you can afford to now start losing cards to these bounce spells.
Yes.
Because you're drawing 2 a turn. So in my Curse of Surveillance decks, I'll probably play multiple bounce like Geist Waves and what have you, because you get to the point where all you want to do is trade mana for board position because you have the cards locked up. So, I mean, imagine like a blue-white deck that has 2 Candle Traps and 2 bounce spells and Curse of Surveillance. Like, just really strong when you get these 1 and 2 mana interactive spells alongside this kind of thing. So I think Curse of Surveillance is really good. There's also some decks that just can't beat this card.
Yeah.
Like you cast this against a blue-red spells deck that doesn't really have a fast clock and they have a bunch of, removal and stuff. They're going to look at this and be like, whoops.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I like BB+ for Curse of Surveillance. Next is Liar, Disciple of the Drowned. This is 3 blue for a 3/4 legendary human wizard and mythic rare. Spells can't be countered. That's just static ability on this 5 mana 3/4. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to the card's mana cost. Wow.
Yeah, if you cast Lier, then your opponent has to kill it, or you're just going to start casting, every spell in your deck twice. One thing to note is spells can't be countered symmetrical, so don't cast counter spells with this. It won't work out very well.
Yeah, so don't even put them in your deck if you have Lier. They're already fringe playable anyway. If a spell already has flashback, you can just choose to flash it back for its base cost.
Yeah.
So it makes which in almost every case, basically every case, it makes it much cheaper to flashback your spells. It, of course, lets you flashback spells that didn't have that as well, which is, of course, extremely powerful because generally speaking, they don't tend to flippantly put flashback on the really bread and butter, like think your removal spells. Those rarely have flashback. So that's fantastic. Really cool card.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be like a B. You're
yeah, I think it's a build around A.
Yeah. It's still a 5 mana 3/4 that probably doesn't do anything the turn you play it, unless you have 7 or 8 mana. Mm-hmm. So your opponent has a turn cycle to kill it. But once this is in play, they're kind of in the squeeze where if they don't kill it, then they lose. But it's a 3/4. It's not the hardest thing to kill or easiest thing to kill. So yeah I like B on Lier. I think most decks should just put it in their deck. I don't even think you need to go crazy building around it.
I do too. I just think it gets insane if you build around it. Last blue card is called Sludge Monster. It is 3 blue for a 5/5 horror. It's rare. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to 1 other target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 2/2.
I mean, this is going to dominate the board, right? Wow. You're going to play this, slime their biggest creature. When you attack, you can slime another creature. So how are they blocking this down? You could also, if you want, slime your own decayed zombies so that they lose the decayed ability. And it's a 5 mana 5/5 on top of all that.
Yeah.
The downside is if they kill it, you lose all the progress because the slime counters stay, but it's the sludge monster itself that's saying what the slime counters do. Without this in play, the slime counters don't do anything. Okay.
You can bring it back and then the slime counters will come back again. But yeah. Also, worth noting, it's a 5/5 and it's likely that you're going to make 2 of their things 2/2s by the time it attacks the first time, which don't line up very well with a 5/5. So they'll need yet another creature to put in front if they're going to actually block and get the job done. Yeah, I mean, this is a must kill. It's tough to kill. It's got 5 toughness. I like A for Sludge Monster.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there's going to be games you play against like a red-green deck. You're like, play this, sludge your 4/4, untap, attack, sludge your 3/3, and they're just like, how do I beat this card? This is stupid.
I can't fight it. I can't burn it. Yeah, that's sweet. Okay, let's move to black. Our first black card is called Champion of the Perished. It's black for a 1/1 zombie. It's rare. It says whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Perished. He's back and looking a little worse for the wear.
Oh, yeah. And it works with the Decayed cards. It, works with just the fact that there's a decent amount of zombies in the set. Definitely a build around. You couldn't just throw this into a deck, but I think like in blue-black, this is going to be a card you're very happy to play because you really need to get 1 counter early, 2 counters in the first couple turns, and then you got your money back. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you get 1 counter the whole game, it's probably not good enough even at 1 mana because you probably didn't get that counter on turn 2. But imagine you play this and you play, the Falcon Abomination, and you put 2 zombies into play on turn 3, and this is a 3/3. Mm-hmm. Sounds great to me.
Yeah.
So I'd give this a build around B.
Me too. Build around B. I mean, it's a pretty premium 1-drop for that deck. Otherwise, it's an F. Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia is next. It's 1 and a black for a 1/1 legendary human wizard at rare. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, you get a 2/2 black zombie creature with Decayed.
This is a really sweet enabler if you have a recurring sacrifice outlet, because you can just eat the Decayed zombie every turn. Also, it means you can just attack with your Decayed zombie every turn.
Yes.
And keep getting it back. So that's enough for me. I mean, you're only paying 2 mana for this. So I would give Jadar a B+. I think it's really easy to build around Jadar and really have him excel. And even by himself, he just sends in a 2/2 every turn for really not much cost to yourself.
Yeah, I like it. I like B for Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia. Next is Slaughter Specialist. Jeez. 1 and a black for a 3/3 vampire warrior at rare. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 white human creature token, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Slaughter Specialist. Ugh, man, it gives your opponent a 1/1 for just freezies.
It's tough because this card is quite undercosted. It's a 2 mana 3/3 that's going to grow every time one of their things dies. But imagine if you play this and then they kill it and then they end up with a 1/1 for free. That's kind of brutal.
Yeah, I want to like this card in the aggressive vampire decks. I mean, it certainly outclasses the thing that it gets. And remember, hitting with cards is important, right? There's a lot of the bloodthirst type of if your opponent lost life this turn stuff, and Slaughter Specialists certainly can get it going. But man, I really hate giving my opponent onboard presence.
I think this is probably worth playing in an aggro deck and probably not worth playing in a control deck. My fear with the control deck is you're not really making use of an early 3/3 all that well, which is a lot of what this is getting you. And the aggro decks are kind of, yes, it gives them a chump blocker. That's definitely bad. Mm-hmm. But this gets paid off when they chump, right? You get a +1/+1 counter. And the red-black deck kind of forces them to chump a lot more often. So you're going to get that ability naturally occurring. So I would give Slaughter Specialist a C. I think you're probably supposed to play this most of the time.
I think so too. My gut says that as well. C for Slaughter Specialist, but that is a genuine downside. Next is Tainted Adversary. This is 1 and a black for a zombie. This one's mythic. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch. Man, they really push these adversaries. I guess if you're going to make 2 mana mythics, you can kind of do it. When it enters a battlefield, you may pay 2 and a black any number of times. This is a little different from the other 2 that we've seen. This one costs 3 extra mana per. And it says, when you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on it, then create twice that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed.
I mean, I'm already in for 2 mana 2/3 Death Touch. Obviously, that's great.
Yeah.
But a 5 mana 3/4 that makes 2 Decayed tokens is great. An 8 mana 4/5 is not going to happen all that often, but it'll make 4 tokens at the very least. So looks to me like probably, I would say A- on this because a 2 mana 2/3 Death Touch is in the B plus range, and that activated ability is pretty legit. I mean, in the late game, when you make 4 zombies with this, you're going to really pressure your opponent. So I like A- on Tainted Adversary.
I do too. I mean, 3/4 Death Touch for 5 mana that brings two zombies that you can sacrifice or throw around. That is fantastic. Yeah. Even though the zombies are crappy. Next is the Meat Hook Massacre. Oh no. This is black X for a legendary enchantment at Mythic Rare. And it says, when the Meat Hook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X until end of turn. And whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life.
I have a short list for best cards in the set because you get a modal wrath, or at least or like a scalable wrath. So if you have a 4/4 and they have 2 3/3s, you can cast this for 3 or what have you. But also it stays in play, and it's super dangerous in play because all your tokens, everything dying, makes them lose a life. And then whenever their stuff dies, you gain a life. You're going to often cast this, and it's going to trigger 3 or 4 times based on how many creatures are in play. I think the Meathook Massacre is an A+. I just don't really see a downside with this card, and the upside is fantastic.
I like A+ for Meathook Massacre as well. That looks like one of the better cards in the set. Bloodline Culling is next. It's 1 black for an instant at rare. It says choose one. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn, or creature tokens get -2/-2 until end of turn. So that's all of them.
Yeah, mostly you're going to play this as a 3 mana -5/-5, which is obviously fine. But every now and then you're going to want to wipe all the decayed tokens off the battlefield or what have you. So
yeah, I'd give it a B+.
Yeah, I like B+ for Bloodline Culling.
I mean, it's just solid removal with upside. Next is Curse of Leeches. Oh, good. This looks like fun. 2 and a black for an aura curse. It's rare. It enchants a player. As this permanent transforms into Curse of Leeches, attach it to a player. Okay, let's just lead off with a confusing statement. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, they lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. And yes, it does have Daybound. So on the other side, it's Leeching Lurker, which is a 4/4 lifelink leech horror with Nightbound. So what is going on here?
So what's going on is a lot of the times you're going to cast this and then put it on them, and they're going to start losing a life and gaining a life on their upkeep. And then at some point it's going to flip into night and just it drops off them and becomes a 4/4 lifelink on your side. It can attack even if it transformed on your upkeep because it was in play. Mm-hmm. And then if it ever
controlled it at the beginning of your turn, okay.
And then if it ever transforms back into day, this just hops back on them and starts nibbling away at them.
Oh God, that's gross.
I mean, either side of this is good. Sometimes you'll actually want one over the other, and it's not always going to be the same side, even though the 4/4 lifelink's a little more powerful. But this is the kind of card, if your opponent plays it on turn 3, you're just going to be like, oh, God damn it, this is going to be hard to beat.
Yes, very annoying to deal with. And it's also a problematic permanent type to kill.
I mean, a 3 mana enchantment that makes them lose a life and you gain a life every turn, I think that card would be really good. Mm-hmm. Like this would be a 3 mana ill-gotten inheritance, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that the turning into a 4/4 is more upside than downside. So we're talking about a pretty good card here. I mean, I would give it a B+. I don't think it's an A, but this card is going to be one of the real groaners when you see it early.
So what's actually going to happen, right, is if Curse of Leeches itself is a problem, then your opponent's going to do what they can do to turn it into Leeching Lurker so they can actually kill it. Because it's a creature,
that's a lot of work.
Right? Yeah. I mean, they have to really do a dance to get around it. So yeah, I like B+ for Curse of Leeches. That is really annoying. Graveyard Trespasser is 2 and a black for a 3/3 human werewolf at rare. It has Ward, discard a card. So if they want to target it, they have to discard a card in addition to any other things. Whenever Graveyard Trespasser enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And it has Daybound. It transforms into Graveyard Glutton, which is a werewolf. It's a 4/4 with the same thing, Ward, discard a card. And whenever Graveyard Glutton enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then, of course, it has Nightbound. So instead of 1 card on the ETB and attack, it goes up to 2 and it becomes a 4/4 instead of a 3/3.
Yeah, not a big difference between the two sides, honestly, but it starts out pretty high. So this looks like a B+ to me. Just a solid creature that's going to, got a good little ping ability, and then it's hard for them to kill.
That's right. And good stats. It's a little out of place in black for the whole werewolf, Daybound, Nightbound thing, but whatever. It doesn't get punished for that. So B+ for Graveyard Trespasser. What does Jaren Corrupted Bishop do? Or what does he do?
2 and a black for a 2/3 mythic legendary human cleric. And it says, whenever Jaren enters the battlefield or another non-token human you control dies, you lose a life and create a 1/1 white human creature token.
Wow.
And these are like real tokens. They're not like decayed or anything. You can block with them if you want.
So Jaren ETBs is a 2/3 with a 1/1 just straight up.
Correct. And then if another non-token human dies, so not him, not the token, but if another one of your humans dies, you lose a life and get another token. It's not optional. Mm-hmm. They can maybe kill you by killing all your humans and making you lose a bunch of life. He also has the ability to, 2 colorless, or too generic. Target human you control gains lifelink until end of turn. Can include himself. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life, you may pay 4 black. If you do, transform Jaren into Ormondal the Corruptor. This is Ormondal from Shadows over Innistrad, same guy from the land. And Ormondal is a 6/6 legendary demon with flying, trample, lifelink, and the ability of sacrifice another creature, draw a card.
Holy crap. Okay. Well, the setup cost is extreme, but boy, Ormondal's no joke.
Well, the setup cost is extreme except for the fact that you would play Jaren without even the transform ability. True. It's just a very good card already.
Yes.
So, but yes, you have to jump through some hoops, but Jaren gives you all the tools to get to exactly 13 because you can pay 2 to give a human lifelink. So it's pretty easy to, like, if you're at 12, give a 1/1 lifelink, or if you're at 11, give a 2/2 lifelink, or trade off a human to go from 14 to 13 because Jaren loses you a life. And then, of course, a 6/6 flying trample lifelink that eats your tokens to draw a card is amazing. So,
what a weird sub game, right? Where you're looking at your life total and your opponent's looking at your life total and you're like, attack with these. And you're like, okay, I really got to figure this out because if I let you go to 13, I'm going to lose to Ormondal pretty badly.
I think Jaren's an A. It's really easy for Jaren to in the late game really just kind of make it easy to win that sub game and turn into Ormondal, which dominates. But even in the early game, this is you play a 2-drop human, then you play this, attack with your human. If they trade, you get another token. You spent 3 mana for 4 or 5 worth of stats on turn 3. Like, that's just absurd. Plus, the target human gains lifelink means you can attack with a 3/3 human and start giving it lifelink. And I don't know, just a lot of powerful stuff going on here. You got to be a little careful with, how this all works. There's some ways for your opponent to kind of disrupt you. But overall, I believe Jaren's an A.
Yeah, I like A for Jaren. Next is Mask of Griselbrand. 1 black for a legendary equipment. It's rare. Equipped creature has flying and lifelink. Whenever equipped creature dies, if you may pay X life, where X is its power. If you do, you draw X cards. And the equip cost is actually kind of a lot. It's 3. Yikes.
Mask of Griselbrand is awesome.
What's that?
I think the Mask of Griselbrand is really good because flying and lifelink means that you get back a lot of the board, the tempo you lose by equipping this.
True.
I'm not saying like, they're playing blue-black and they have 5 mana up and you're like, all right, play Mask and equip it to my biggest creature because it might not work out well. But you should be able to sneak this in at a time. And a lot of the cost you pay with equipment's not just they kill or bounce the creature, right? It's you spent 6 mana to equip a creature and then they trade off.
Right.
But this gets around that by flying. A, giving it lifelink, so you're already gaining a bunch of life back. B, giving it flying, so you put this on a 3/3 even. They probably can't block it. You attack in and gain 3. And then if the creature does die, if you want, it's optional. You can cash in, X life for X cards, which is a really good deal too. You put that on that 3/3. You trade in combat. You draw 3 cards. You don't lose any life because the lifelink kind of offset that. This is the kind of card where if your opponent plays this, a lot of the time you're going to really struggle to win the game. That said, it's slow. It's got some downsides. It's not an A-level card, but I think Mask of Griselbrand is going to be like, if I could choose a top-end threat, this is among, high on that list. Think of this as like a 6-mana 5/5 flyer. This is pretty close to that in terms of the effect it's going to have on the game and, the places it's going to be good. It does need some other support. You do need to put other creatures in your deck and all that, but it's really easy for the lifelink and the death ability to get around a lot of the drawbacks that equipment typically has.
All right, how about this? Throw Mask of Griselbrand on a Decayed token.
Yeah, that's also great.
Just gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, continue on.
Well, you're gonna then lose the 2 life, but yeah, it's so it's gonna offset with the right. You're gonna end up just up 2 cards, but still like paying 3 to draw 2 cards every turn is pretty nice, and your opponent's taking 2 damage probably.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of convinced. I mean, you do need a specific setup for Mask of Griselbrand, as you said. You don't want to run it out haphazardly, but is it a B?
I think it's a B, maybe B plus. I feel like you're not going to want to cast this on turn 3, but if you cast this on turn 6 and equip it when your opponent's tapped out, there's not that much they can do to punish you.
No, and it's true. Like, they have to kill the thing. And if they kill the thing, you get the cards.
Flying lifelink.
Right, exactly. Or even worse, right? It could be a 4/4/5/5 or something crazy.
Right.
So, all right, B for Mask of Griselbrand, maybe even trending upwards. Gisa, Glorious Resurrector. Oh, she's just partying it up. Look at that. Two black for a 4/4 legendary human wizard at rare. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Okay, fine. 4 mana 4/4 with like some upside there. At the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Geese the Glorious Resurrector on to the battlefield under your control. They gain Decayed. Oh, that's sweet.
Oh yeah, I mean, Geese is very, very good. It's not as brutal as you just steal all their creatures that die, because again, Decayed is a pretty big cost. But you do get the ETB effects. You do get their abilities. Like you like if you put a tapper into play, you can just start using it as a tapper, for example. And at the very least, all their creatures hit their opponent once extra time before they die, right? So
yeah.
Plus, it's a 4 mana 4/4. So
yeah.
Looks like an A- for Giza. There's just no downside.
I think so too. Sweet card. And you know, the Decayed on bigger creatures is a much bigger problem for the opponent. You know, we've been knocking the zombies because they're just 2/2s, but 4/4s and 5/5s is like, you can only take so many hits. You know, can you imagine attack you with your own Decayed creature and they have to trade for it or chump it or something just to not die? It's just, oh, that feels terrible. Last black card is called Lord of the Forsaken. Wow, that's a name. It's 4 black for a 6/6 demon at Mythic Rare with flying and trample. And it has black, sacrifice another creature, target player mills 3 cards. And it also has another ability, pay 1 life and add colorless mana. Spend this mana only to cast a spell from your graveyard. Okay, so that one, whatever, but my God, 6 mana flying trample 6/6 that has the ability to like turbo mill your opponent out. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, are they going to die from damage or are they going to die from milling?
Pick your poison, friendo.
Not really much to say here besides the fact that you want to put 6 mana 6/6 flying tramples in your deck.
Yes.
And then if somehow the 6 power flyer doesn't close out the game, you can mill them out. Plus, if you want, you can self mill. Like you can sack. You know, decayed tokens are obviously the normal thing. And you know, sometimes you will flash back one of your creatures, a disturbed creature or a flashback spell, by using this ability. It's not unreasonable to consider that as well.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is you're going to cast it, say go. If they don't kill it, when they say go, say how many cards in your library. And then you're going to start bashing them for 6 in the air. And if they don't kill it, they lose the game. Okay, so that part's easy. And then if they, you know, rip a card off the top and they go, okay, destroy your Lord of the Forsaken, then you go, how many cards in your library? And you're like 3, you know, they're like 12. You're like, okay, I got 4 creatures, you're dead. And you're just going to sort of plan B into that. And of course, if a creature's going to die anyway, you might as well minus some value, either mill them or mill yourself, depending on what your plan is. Well, that's an A. If I've ever seen one, that's just a straight up bomb. A+, A, whatever.
I think it's closer to an A- than an A+, but I'm willing to settle for A.
Okay, A for Lord of the Forsaken, or is it Lord of the Forsaken? Next is red. We'll move to red. Falconwrath Pit Fighters first. It's red for a 2/1 Vampire Warrior at rare. It has activated ability 1 in a red and discard a card and sacrifice a vampire to draw 2 cards, and you can do it only if an opponent lost life this turn.
I like this. I mean, you can sacrifice the pit fighter herself, though you still have to have damage them, of course. So a curve you could do if you wanted is play this turn 1, hit them, and then sack it to draw 2, but probably not worth doing that and giving up the board position most of the time. Mm-hmm. Still, it's a 1 mana 2/1 that is relevant later in the game, and sometimes this can actually just be a whole engine. You just hit them and then start sacking your crappy vampires. You can do it like multiple times if you want. Very strong card. B+ for Falconwrath Pit Fighter. Just kind of does it all. Yeah,
and it really fits into the black-red vampire deck just beautifully. Light Up the Night is next. It's red X for a sorcery at rare. It says Light Up the Night deals X damage to any target. It deals X plus 1 damage instead if that target is a creature or planeswalker. Wow, that's nice. They actually spot you the red. Wow, and it has flashback, but this is kind of weird. The flashback is 3 in a red and remove X loyalty counters from among planeswalkers you control. If you cast the spell this way, X can't be 0. Huh?
So the flashback is not really relevant. You're not going to have a planeswalker basically ever, but red X can hit your opponent. You can just kill them with it. It's straight up blaze. But also, if it's a creature or a planeswalker, which is not going to come up too often, but if it's a creature, you even get a 1 mana discount.
Yeah,
like it does X plus 1 damage. Looks like an A to me because you can spend 3 mana to kill, a 3/3 creature, which is fine, but also you can spend 8 mana to kill your opponent.
Yes, and that is a significant upside because it gives you a game plan to build around. So I like A for Light Up the Night. Next is Bloodthirsty Adversary. Okay, here we go. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 vampire with haste. It's a mythic. And when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a red any number of times. Oh, this is going to be really good. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on it, then exile up to that many target instant and or sorcery cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana costs. So you can cast 0, 1, 2, or 3 of them for free.
So it's a 2 mana 2/2 haste that also has 5 mana as a 3/3 that plays a spell, or 8 mana as a 4/4 that plays 2 spells. Those are actually
the use cases. You're right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Oh, quite good. I mean, you're not really going to want to play this on turn 2 because playing it on turn 5 is going to be kind of the sweet spot where you get to play this and replay a kill spell, hopefully, and as a 3/3 haste that kills one of their creatures. But the fact that you can play it on turn 2 is nice. Really, the only quibble I have with the card is like she's wielding 2 crossbows, which is pretty unrealistic because they're probably kind of heavy and hard to aim with one hand, and there's no way you can reload them without 2 hands.
There's no way you could reload a second crossbow with one hand.
Reloading a crossbow with 2 hands is already like kind of slow, is my understanding. So, but I'm Bloodthirsty Adversary. I would give it a B+. I don't think it's I agree. A level card. If you get enough cheap removal that this can recast, it starts to get up there. But I would say B+ is a good place to start for Bloodthirsty Adversary.
Agreed. Yeah, setup cost is real there. Curse of Shaken Faith is next. It's 1 and a red for a curse at rare. And enchants a player. Whenever enchanted player casts a spell other than the first spell they cast each turn, or copies a spell, Curse of the Shaken Faith deals 2 damage to them. No.
F. They have too much control over when this would work, and it rarely will work. This is a constructed sideboard card against like Storm decks or whatever.
Yep.
And honestly, not even that good, much of a good one.
No, but Storm doesn't cast. Yeah. All right. So
F for Curse. Well, it does do copies also, but
okay.
I'm just saying, like, there are most formats where Storm is good. You can probably find more effective sideboard cards. It isn't. But fair. This isn't constructed resources. That's a different show that you should probably.
Yeah, you guys can talk about that on there. What about Smoldering Egg?
I love this one.
I do not want to get anywhere near this thing just based on the artwork.
Well, speaking of things, this is Thing in the Egg. If you remember Thing in the Ice, it's 1 and a red for an 0/4. It's got Defender. It's a dragon egg at rare. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a number of Ember counters on Smoldering Egg equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. Then if it has 7 or more Ember counters on it, remove them and transform it into Ashmouth Dragon. It's a 4/4 flyer that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Ashmouth Dragon deals 2 damage to any target.
Dang.
So not only does this flip into a 4/4 flyer that gives you a free shock every time you cast a spell, the flipping condition I think is much, much stronger than Thing in the Ice's was because it doesn't care about how many spells you cast. It just wants you to spend 7 mana on spells in total. And if you like flashback a spell for more than its mana cost, it counts how much you actually spent. Like a 1 mana spell that flashes back for 5 puts 5 counters on this.
So you could do it for 1 spell. Like if it was a 7 mana, whatever.
If you flash back Memory Deluge, right, that blue spell, that flips this by itself. Yes.
Wow. Okay. And this dragon is super powerful.
I would give Smoldering Egg a builder on A. You can't put this into a deck with 5 spells and expect to really get much mileage. But a deck with 7 or more spells, especially if they tend to be like 3 or 4 mana spells, it's not hard to flip this by casting 2 spells. And once you flip it, you have a 4/4 flyer that's kind of going to dominate the board because every spell you cast is starting to ping them. Obviously, blue-red is the natural home for this, but you could fit this into other decks as well.
I think I would pay attention to flashback as well, right? There's many flashback spells. In fact, I would say most of them that add up to 7 on their own. You cast the front side. Itself. Yeah. You don't have, so that requires the setup cost a lot lower on Smoldering Egg. That is dope. Build around A?
Build around A. I mean, when you have it, you play this on turn 2. It's an 0/4. It can't really kill it. And then you flip it a few turns later. And if they don't have a removal spell, they're just out of luck.
They're just dead. And you can even block with it.
And you didn't spend that much mana. You spent 2 mana on this. Like, yes, right. you probably made plays with spells you might not have played otherwise. But it's not a big investment.
Geist Flame Reservoir is next. It's 2 and a red for an artifact. It's rare. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Geist Flame Reservoir. You can pay 1 and a red and tap it to remove any number of charge counters from it. It deals that much damage to any target. Okay. And then you can pay 1 and a red, tap it, and exile the top card of your library. You can play that card this turn. Wow.
That seems pretty sweet. It's in a deck with a low curve, especially a deck with a lot of spells, the 2 mana tap is going to be close to drawing a card because, again, it's play, so you can play lands off this. So you you don't want to play this turn 3 and use it turn 4. But if you have, let's say you start your turn with this and 5 lands in play, you kick things off by activating it. If you hit a land, you play your land and go along with your turn. You've drawn an extra card. If you hit a spell of some kind, ideally you can play it with the amount of mana you have available. And it's like you drew a card. You're not going to miss that often. But then it also has this ability where it's like building up counters, and then every now and then it'll take a turn off to shoot one of their creatures for 3 or something. So
long game, this card seems really difficult. I mean, at some point you've gotten a couple of free lands off of it, and you can just start to use its second ability every turn, and then as you build up the others, you can use it to manage the board. How build around-y do you think Geist Flame Reservoir is? Like, would you put it in?
I'd put it in a red-white aggro deck that had very few spells.
Just for the second ability, primarily?
Because, first of all, these decks don't have no spells. You're still going to get a counter every now and then. Mm-hmm. But also, in a deck with a low curve, I mean, a 3-mana artifact that's 2-tap draw card is pretty good. And obviously, it's a little worse than that. But if your curve's low enough, it's not going to be dramatically worse.
Right. Grade?
I would lean towards like a B minus on the Geist Flame Reservoir.
It's really slow. It's
slow.
Obviously really great if you can get it into the blue-red deck specifically, because then you're really hammering that first thing. C plus B minus for me on Geist Flame Reservoir. I mean, it requires a lot, but it's there. That is a consistent card advantage engine at the worst. Reckless Stormseeker is next. It's 2 and a red for a human werewolf. At rare, it's a 2/3. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Wow. And it has Daybound. Transforms into Storm Charge Slasher, which is a 3/4 werewolf that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn.
The floor on this is the Hulking Bugbear. It's a 3-mana 3/3 haste because it can just target itself.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
then
incredible.
It flips into a 3/4 that gives a creature +2/+0 trample and haste. Yeah, I mean, Reckless Stormseeker is just a beating. Definitely interested in putting this card in any deck that with red mana. I would give it a B+. Very good card.
How does the flipping part work with, walk me through the timing on that? Like, when can I get it into Storm Charge Slasher and actually get the thing on one of my attacking creatures?
So let's say you play this and, it becomes day. And then if they don't play anything on their turn, on your upkeep, this will flip to a 3/4. And then beginning of combat, it'll do the thing.
So that's the quickest. If my
what's
opponent.
Gross is if you play this at night, it's a 3/4 that'll immediately give itself +2/+0 trample and haste and attack for 5.
5/4 trample haste. Wow. Okay. What grade do you want to give it? B+?
I like B+ on this.
Yeah, same. What does Moonveil Regent do? That's cool art.
Nice. It's a 3 and a red for a 4/4 dragon at Mythic. It's got flying. Whenever you cast a spell, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw a card for each of that spell's colors. When Moonveil Regent dies, it deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So, first of all, it plays a little like Experimental Frenzy, where every time you play a spell, if you want, you can cash in your hand, probably for 1 card. Most of the spells you cast are going to be 1 color. But
2 at the most.
2 at the most. But imagine, you're playing like a red-black deck and you play Regent and then you have 1 or 2 cards left in hand. On your next turn, you play a land, play a card, discard your hand to draw a card, play that, draw another card. Like, you can just kind of chain cards if you have enough cheap stuff. You also don't have to discard your hand. And of course, it's a 4-mana 4/4 flyer. That's already great. And then when it dies, it'll ping for probably 1 damage, or maybe 2. It won't count itself because it's not in play anymore. But if you're playing a 2-color deck and you have 1 permanent of each color, this dying and dealing 2 means take something on the way out. I don't see how you could not give this an A. It's a 4-mana 4/4 flyer with multiple upsides.
Yeah, definitely. It's a weird card, a little tricky, but we kind of buried the lead, right? It is just 4-mana 4/4 flyer with other stuff. A for Moonveil Regent. Sunstreak Phoenix is next. It's 2 red for a Phoenix. It's mythic rare. It's a 4/2 flyer. If it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as Sunstreak Phoenix enters the battlefield. And whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, you may pay 1 in a red. If you do, you guessed it, return Sunstreak Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
This is another fantastic card. A 4-mana 4/2 flyer that will come back multiple times. I mean, the fact that you have full control if you want to flip it from day to night means that if this trades off and it's day, you can just say, all right, well, you know what? A Sunstreak Phoenix is better than any spell I could cast. Go on your upkeep. This comes back. It's tapped. It doesn't defend you right away, but good Lord, is this card obnoxious? I can't really imagine beating this without like an exile effect or a passivism style effect because it just keeps coming back and it's a 4/2 flyer. You can't really ignore it. It can block your creatures. I think this is another A. I mean, this is really strong card.
Yeah, I really like that it hits really hard if you're attacking with the 4 power, but it also trades off for most things. So it's like kind of good in either scenario. If you need to trade off, you can. And if you're beating down, it's a quick clock. So A for Sunstreak Phoenix. Last red card is Burn Down the House. It's 3 red for a sorcery. It's rare to choose one. Burn Down the House deals 5 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, or create 3 1/1 red devil creature tokens when they die. They do 1 damage to any target, and they happen to gain haste until end of turn as well. Wow.
I mean, this is another A because
that's incredible.
When you need a Wrath, it's a Wrath. It's 5 mana to deal 5 to everything, including planeswalkers if that comes up. That's going to be enough to kill basically anything you care about. But if you don't need a Wrath, it's 5 mana for 3 1/1s, and them dying to ping means they all trade off as if they were 2/1s, or even better, because if they have like a 2/1 flyer, they can't even, let any of these die or they lose their flyer. Plus, haste means you can randomly attack them. Duh, that's not a big part of the card. But a split card of Wrath or 3 1/1 devils, depending on what situation is better for you, again, that's fantastic. I think this card's a straight up A.
I do too. Primarily a defensive card in both modes, but they are so different that flexibility bumps it up into the A range for me too. So Burn Down the House gets an A. That moves us to green. Our first green card is Willowgeist. This is green for a 1/1 Treefolk Spirit. It is rare. It has trample. Just anything with like 1 or 0 power with trample is just kind of charming. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Willowgeist. When Willowgeist dies, you gain life equal to its power. So this is looking at things like Flashback,
Disturb.
Yeah. I think I don't want it.
No, the problem I have with Willowgeist is, for the most part, you're not going to get counters on this until a 2/2 or a 3/3 is just not that relevant.
Right. Turn 5, turn 6, something like that.
Yeah, so this looks like a D to me. It's not terrible. One counter, you end up with a 2/2 trample that gains you 2 when it dies, but it's just not going to work out all that well. So I like D for Willowgeist.
Dare to dream, but at D for Willowgeist. What about Augur of Autumn?
This is 1 green for a 2/3 human druid at rare. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands from the top of your library. And it has Coven. As long as you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Awesome card.
Nice.
I mean, this is a Courser of Crufix that you trade a 4th point of toughness and the life gain for the fact that you can play creatures off the top as well, which in limited, especially when you're playing lands off the top, so you're like kind of cycling through your deck quickly. If they don't kill this, you're just going to start to be able to play everything off the top of your deck, at which point you're going to win the game very quickly. I would give Augur of Autumn an A-. There's really no point in the game where this card's not a threat. Early, it'll let you play a land or 2, and that'll get you to Coven sooner, right? Late in the game, you probably have Coven. Imagine you draw this with 7 lands in play, and you play it. Most of the time, you're playing 1 or 2 cards off the top of your library immediately.
Right.
And then it feeds itself, where the more lands you have in play, the more mana you have to cast those creatures and all that. So really tough to beat this card if it stays in play. It's obviously killable, but it doesn't require any risk from your side. I would give it an A-.
I would too. It also is purpose built for limited because, most of the time something like 80 to 90% of your deck is going to be either lands or creatures. So that's obviously well built. And then the one other thing to consider is if you do have another 3-drop, it might be better to run that out on 3 and then on turn 4, play this and see if you hit the land so that you can play it straight away, because this doesn't let you play more lands than you normally could and you can try to get some value before it dies because people are going to kill this card, no doubt about it. So Augur of Autumn gets an A-. Briarbridge Tracker is next. 2 and a green for a 2/3 Vigilance. It's Human Scout at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate, so you get a clue token. And as long as you control a token, it gets +2/+0. So you get a 4/3 as long as, well, that token's around, or if you can replace it with something else as well.
Man, this is another A-. You're not doing any work. You're getting a 3-mana 4/3 Vigilance that at some point draws you a card. And maybe you have to wait to investigate until you've traded this off. But a 3-mana 4/3 draw card with 0 risk entailed?
Right.
You don't get much better than that.
No. And this is, and I'm sure some people are going, this gets an A-, but the demon gets an A, or what, this isn't like that card. It's true, but this is an efficiency grade, right? This is, you are just getting so much for your 3 mana that is never bad, that you're going to be able to cast effectively every game of limited that you draw it, right? There's very few games where you don't get to 3 lands, and it's going to be great every single time.
I would even believe that demon is probably closer to an A-, and this is closer to an A.
Yeah.
The 6-mana 6/6. Like, when this is in your opening hand, it's going to win you a lot of games really easily. Whereas the demon, there's a lot of games you don't even get to 6 mana, or you get to 6 mana and they kill it. The upside of just being a guaranteed rate of return and being really cheap is really high. So I like A- for Briarbridge Tracker.
I do too. I like A- for it. What an incredible card. Next is Primal Adversary. All right, here we go. 2 and a green for a wolf. It's mythic. It's a 4/3 trample for 3. And when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a green any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Then up to that many target lands you control become 3/3 wolf creatures with haste that are still lands, and they stay that way?
So it's funny how close this is to Briarbridge Tracker, because this is also a 3-mana 4/3, this time with Trample instead of Vigilance. And yeah, it scales nicely. It is a kind of a shame that it makes your lands into 3/3s instead of just putting tokens into play, because you end up in a spot where you're incurring some risk, but it also doesn't matter. It's a 3-mana 4/3 Trample, or a 5-mana 5/4 Trample that comes with probably a tapped 3/3, or a 7-mana 6/5 with 2 3/3s. It's just straight up A. Primal Adversary is good on 3, good on 5, good on 7, good on 9. Like, just a great card.
You could pay 7 mana and get 12 power. It's just like, okay. A for Primal Adversary. Yeah, they push those. I mean, they are mythic. Sereth the Viper's Fang is next. It's 2 green for a 3/4 legendary human warlock at rare. Other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch. Other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof, and you can pay 1 mana and tap it to have another target creature, to untap another target creature or land you control. So tapped creatures having Death Touch means that when they're attacking, right? Because if they're tapped, they can't block. So attacking creatures have Death Touch is another way to look at that. Other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof, so they just can't take out your blockers. And you can switch those.
But like most things that give other things hexproof, there's not that many situations where they're not going to target this.
That's right.
You do get to untap one of your creatures to give it hexproof if they try to kill it. So a little bit of on-the-board trickiness.
Yeah, if this is untapped and you have the mana.
This is good. I mean, it's definitely got more going on than just a 3/4 for 4, but I don't know how often it's going to be amazing where, like, if you attack with a 1/1 or 2/2 Death Touch, they're probably just going to take it. If you attack with a 3/3 or 4/4, well, Death Touch isn't like amazing on bigger creatures. Obviously, it can mess up double blocks or what have you. And then untapping creatures and lands is an okay ability. It's a bunch of okay abilities together. Probably give it a B. It's just a good card. You put it in your deck, but it's not a bomb.
Yeah, it looks like B plus to me for Sereth the Viper's Fang. I mean, if all your creatures attack with Death Touch, it does make your opponent in kind of an awkward situation. Next is Consuming Blob. Dear God, it's 3 green for a star, and then star +1 is the toughness. It's an ooze. It's mythic. It says Consuming Blob's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. At the beginning of your end step, create a green ooze creature token with this creature's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that plus 1.
So it's a Tarmogoyf is a good way to think about it if you've played with that card.
That spits out more Tarmogoyfs?
And at the end of your turn, it makes another Tarmogoyf every turn.
That's sweet.
Oh, yeah, this card's really good. It's most of the time, the most in a normal set, you'd think this would be a 3/4 by the mid-game, instant creature sorcery. But because of the like self-mill themes and discard themes, lands will go to the graveyard a little bit more than average. So I think that this is going to be a 3/4 or a 4/5 a lot of the time. And then every now and then you're going to spike an enchantment or artifact and it's just going to go nuts. Plus, let's say it was a 2/3. A 5-mana 2/3 that makes a 2/3 every turn still be a pretty good card.
Yeah.
And I think that the ceiling is going to be a lot higher most of the time. Like, or rather, the floor is going to be a lot higher most of the time. Like, I think.
And that's your end step, so you're getting it like most of the time.
If they don't have mana up, you're just going to play this as a 3/4 and it makes another 3/4.
Yeah.
So I would give an A to Consuming Blob. You don't have to do anything. If you have this in play and you're not dying, you're going to win the game. Yes. The burden is on your opponent to kill this.
Yes, and immediately. So yeah, I like A for Consuming Blob. Next is A. It's our preview card, Unnatural Growth. 1 green, 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 green. 5 mana, 4 of which must be green. That's a little rough, but it's an enchantment that says at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn.
The fact that it's each combat is a pretty big game. It means it's not just an aggressive card. It is really hard to cast. Quad green is a lot. Yes. In a normal split deck, that means that you probably have to have in the vicinity of 7 or 8 lands to cast this. Obviously, if once you have this card, you want to play like 10 or 11 forests and, like minimize your second color. But that's not always going to be an option. So how good is it, though? If you have a 2/2 and a 3/3 out, this is giving you 5/5 worth of stats every turn. That's not bad. And obviously, with it scales very nicely when you add one more creature and you're getting 10/10 worth of stats instead or what have you. So I would probably give this like a B-. Like the casting cost is a big part of that. If this costs green and 4 colorless or something, or 2 green and 3 colorless, I'd probably give it like a B+. I'm just kind of accounting for the fact that some amount of times you'll have 6 lands in play and there'll be 3 forests and 3 mountains.
Is it worth giving a build around notation here? Like, would you play it in a deck? So let's say you had a 10-7 split towards forest. Would you play it?
Yeah, I would definitely play it in that deck.
Okay. Where do you want to be? 11,
10-7 or 11-6.
Okay.
Like you just don't want to be 9-8.
Okay.
And you certainly don't want to be 8-9, like 8 forests, because then you're just
so
you need
minimum
20
10
cards or whatever. But you would ideally 10. I think you could play it at 9 if you had enough like card draw or mana fixing like ramp sort of stuff or whatever. But you'd like to go 10 or 11 if you can swing that. So
certainly worth it. I mean, if you have any board presence at all, Natural Growth just completely dominates.
Yeah.
Okay, so B, but really keep that mana consideration, because that is the weak point of Unnatural Growth. And then, of course, make sure your creature count's relatively high. Like, you don't want to put this in a deck with 7 creatures or whatever.
Right, of course.
From the people who brought you Ren and 6, can I interest you in a Ren and 7?
It's 3 green for a legendary planeswalker, Ren at Mythic. It's got 5 loyalty. It's got 4 abilities. The +1 is reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all lands into your hand and the rest in your graveyard. The 0 is put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. The -3 is make a green tree folk with reach and power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So it actually, the creature has that ability. So it will continue to grow as you play more lands.
Okay.
It's not locked in at the time that you use the -3.
But we're assuming you have 5 at this point with Ren and 7, so you're getting a 5/5?
You're getting a 5/5 that will grow as time goes on. With reach, yes.
Oh, okay.
And then the -8 is return all permanents from your graveyard to your hand, and you get an emblem with no max hand size.
Don't care. So all I'm really looking at is -3 here, Louise.
Well, what's mostly going to happen is you're going to go play this, make a tree folk, because that means like at the very least you traded 1 for 1, right? They killed your tree folk, then killed this, and it's a 1 for 1. And if they can't kill it, because it's obviously a pretty good blocker, you then get to untap and probably plus it, get a bunch of lands. And then on the next turn, if
cash it in, baby.
If you think Ren and 7 is going to die, you just make another tree folk that are probably 7/7s by now, because you're probably hitting your land drops with the +1. If you have the luxury to continue +1ing, then you can kind of build up towards that emblem. But really, this is just a tree folk machine.
Yeah, so I can't imagine using the 0 ability.
The zero ability really is only useful if you've hit really nicely on the +1 twice. Like you +1 hit 3 lands, +1 hit 3 lands, and you have 5 lands in your hand. Because then you could make your tree folk into an 11/11 or something.
Yeah, if I ever have 3 loyalty, I feel in limited, I'm probably just -3 because these things are huge. Like they're going to be a real problem. 6/6s, 5/5s that become 6/6s or 7/7s. If you can get 2 of those, like there's not much your opponent's going to be able to do. They can't kill you through a massive reach creature, and you can start sending them in. I like how you described it. It's a reach creature factory.
Pretty easy A for Ren and 7 here.
I like Ren and 7 as well at A. Storm the Festival is next. It's 3 green for a sorcery at rare. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put up to 2 permanent cards with mana value 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And it has flashback for the low price of 10 mana, 7 green.
So you only get to look at 5, which means that, it's not like 6 off like Collected Company, for example. So you got to, if that's a card you're used to playing, you got to, shift your expectations a little bit. But you get permanents with mana value 5 or less, which does include lands. Not that that's that exciting on 6 mana, but here's the upside. If let's say you only hit 1 creature in a land, you got a little closer to that flashback at least. Mm-hmm. The sweet spot, of course, is hitting 2 5-drops.
On average, let's say if you hit a 3 and a 4, are you okay with this? You're up a little bit on mana. You have a flashback card kind of for free.
I'm not super happy with that because you spent 6 mana, and at that point in the game, a 3-drop's not really worth 3 mana all that often.
Right.
Like it's not going to have the hugest impact on the board. It's a sorcery too. You can't end of turn this.
Right.
But the flashback's a real threat because it means if you play this and the board stalls, at some point you're going to get to 10 mana, and then you're going to get a whole new bite at the apple. So. Mm-hmm. I think you should probably put this in most decks that have a good amount of creatures, like 14 creatures that cost 5 or less, of course. And you don't want, you can't count 6 drops towards this category.
Because if you hit a 5 and a 4, you kind of did it, right? That's where you're all right, we got there.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's 10 mana to flashback. I agree with you, but it's there's also going to be games where you never get to.
With 14 creatures in your deck and looking at 5 cards.
Are we getting hypergeometric? I'm feeling it.
we are, yes. You're 60% to hit 2 of the creatures, and that doesn't count lands.
So 2 of the creatures, of any creatures.
Yes. If you have 14 creatures in your deck and you cast this is, again, when you do these kind of calculations, you just look at a 39 card deck because you don't account for what mix of lands or spells you've drawn before. It just doesn't really. It's just better just to look at straight up 39. There are, if you want to go real Frank Carson on this, there are more accurate ways, but this is a good enough way.
Okay. Can you do it for me if, let's say that the only good hits that we have are 5s and 4s, those, let's say those are our, kind of payoff hits or whatever. And let's say we have 3 5s and 4 4s. So 7 total.
You're 20% to hit 2 of those. Okay. But you're 65% to hit 1 of them. So if you hit 1 of those plus a smaller creature, it's not too bad. The other thing, though, is if you go up to 17 creatures, all of a sudden you're 73%, almost 74% to hit 2 creatures.
Okay. Yeah, so, I think I would run this. Yeah, I think I would.
I would generally run this. If you have Storm the Festival, you should probably concentrate on 5s instead of 6s, obviously.
Yep.
And then B, try to get your creature count 16, 17 if you can. You're just going to get paid off a little more. Yeah. It is nice, though. Paying 6 for 6 or 7 worth of value if you can swing that, maybe 8, upwards of 9 or 10 if you can really get there. And then having that flashback. The flashback actually does matter.
It is. Because if, again, Louis said, if you hit 2 3s with this, you might think, oh, well, I'm even on mana. I've said 6, I got 6 mana. But you're kind of not at that point in the game because those 3s are worse. You'd often rather have 1 good 5 rather than 2 mediocre 3s, for example, which normally you wouldn't think that, but that does actually come up pretty often. I would give Storm the Festival still a mediocre grade. I would give it a C. It's still asking a heck of a lot of you, and it's not necessarily going to pay you off. It's not like this is just guaranteed awesome. So I'm not super stoked, but I think I would put it in my deck if I met those requirements.
I'm trending towards C+. Okay. And I could even see decks where it's closer to a B- where you just really
a ramp deck.
lean into this. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you can turbo this out on turn 5 or something, that does get a lot better. So there you go. All right, last green card is called Tovalar's Huntmaster. It's 4 green for a 6/6 human werewolf at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. Dear God, I've made jokes about Grave Titan before, but now we just actually get it. It also has Daybound. It transforms into Tovalar's Pack Leader, which is a 7/7 werewolf. And when Tovalar's Pack Leader enters the battlefield or attacks, it gets 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. So what is that, to account for night or something? The enters the battlefield part? What are they?
Yeah, if it's night when you cast this, you get the full Grave Titan experience.
Wow, okay. And then you can pay 2 green and have another target wolf or werewolf you control fight target creature you don't control. The only downside is it doesn't count this one, which is a 7/7, which would be kind of an obvious fight, but still you can have your other wolves punch stuff. This is absurd. You say 6 mana and you get 10 power and 10 toughness, just like at the minimum? That's your worst case scenario?
I mean, when you say the only downside, I hear the interview question, what's your greatest weakness? It's like, well, my greatest weakness is that I have no weaknesses.
Yeah, my greatest weakness is I work too hard. I mean, this is just stupid.
It's an A+. I mean, this might be the best card in the set.
Yeah, that might be the best card in the set, yeah.
Basically, there's no way to lose out on this. If they kill it, you end up with 2 wolves. If they don't kill it, you win the game.
Yeah.
That's really not that complicated.
That's really crazy. And, as we've noticed, as you've probably noticed, I put a big premium on cards that I can cast that if the board is at parity, it puts me ahead. If I'm behind, it puts me to parity or ahead. And if I'm ahead, it wins me the game. And this meets all those requirements with ease. Fantastic. Okay, so that's it for green. We've just got a couple of more cards to cover here. There's a cycle of dual lands. They're lands, they're all rare. When they enter battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands, and they tap for blue, white, green, white. What are these? The friendly colors?
Yeah, they're the friendly colors, and these are. Everyone's going to call them the slow lands because they're the opposite of the fast lands.
Right.
These are just clearly like a slightly better Evolving Wilds, honestly. They're just because the vast majority of the time they'll just enter untapped and they're a 2-color card. But they're all sea level cards. You wouldn't take them over anything good you wanted for your deck, but you take them over filler.
Mediocre duels here. There is that full cycle though of all of the friendly pairs, and then there's you like this card, right? The hostile.
I like the name, first of all. This is a Hostile. Hostile is a mythic land that taps for a colorless and has the ability of 1 tap, sack a creature, put a soul counter on Hostile. Then if there are 3 or more counters on it, remove those counters, transform it, untap it, and you can activate only as a sorcery. But this is a fantastic way to use Decayed tokens because it flips into Creeping In, another nice little pun. Creeping In is a 3/7 artifact creature horror construct. When it attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled with Creeping In. So you get to start eating the things you've sacrificed, presumably, unless they're tokens, and it drains them for 1, then it drains them for 2, and then so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. It also has the ability of 4 colorless. Creeping In phases out, which means, again, it kind of like disappears until the beginning of your next turn, but it won't like reflip or anything. It stays in the state that it's in. So it's a colorless land. That's the cost, right? You play this, and if your mana's bad, maybe you just play this as your 18th land, and then you're actually getting upside because it's like a spell that taps for mana. Mm-hmm. And then if you can feed this 3 things, you get a 3/7 that's a really big threat and hard to kill because you can just keep mana up to protect it.
And what is the sorcery part of this?
You can only sack creatures as a sorcery, so you don't get to keep mana up and sack after blocks or when they remove something.
So they really do need to be truly expendable creatures to make this a thing.
You want either Decayed tokens or a way to make 1/1 human tokens, that sort of thing. Okay. But I would give this a build around B+. In a deck with a stream of tokens, this card is a really big threat.
Yeah, it's a nice payoff. Okay, B+ for Hostile, and A+ for the name. Pithy Needle is back, 1 mana artifact. It's rare. As Pithy Needle enters the battlefield, choose a card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. Never seen a limited format where Pithy Needle was a thing.
No, it's just an F. There's just not enough use cases because most of the time when you name a card, that card still does at least something else.
Yeah.
And you're in a situation where you have to name a card, and if they don't have it, you're down a card. If they do have it, you traded 1 for 1. Just not really a card worth putting in your deck.
Not the thing. Last card is the Celestis. It's 3 mana for a legendary artifact at rare. It says if it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as it enters the battlefield. It taps to add 1 mana of any color. So your basic functionality here is 3 mana rock. But you can also pay 3 mana and tap it. And it says if it's night, it becomes day. Otherwise, it becomes night. Activate only as a sorcery. And then it says whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, you gain a life. You may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. It loots.
This card's quite strong.
It is good.
It's because a 3 mana rock is generally a little below curve, right? Mm-hmm. We tend not to put the 3 mana tap for any mana of any color cards in our deck of the mana lists, but some decks do want them. You know, it's okay in like a ramper deck or a 3-color deck, but it doesn't take much more to make it a card you actively want in your deck. And this, when you play this, every now and then it's going to flip and you're going to get a life and you're going to get a loot. And it also gives you control over whether it's night or day. You can really easily flip by just paying some mana. So it's not so much that you're going to use this, pay 3 and tap and flip this to trigger itself. It's more that if your opponent has creatures you want to flip or you have creatures you want to flip, you'll kind of mess with night day. But just the whole package here, you get more than what you pay for, which makes the Celestis a B in my opinion. I would not put this in an aggro deck or a low curve deck, but in any mid-range or control deck, I think this is well worth playing.
I think so too. I mean, just the presence of flashback, you know, meaning that having 7 mana, having 6 mana, having 8 mana in the late game and actually having a place to do it that's relevant means that mana rocks go up a little bit, ramp goes up a little bit, and this thing gives you enough upside on top for sure. So there you go. Okay, that's it, Luis. We did it. We did the whole set. This set, I'm really excited for this one. The rares and mythics are along the same lines as what we saw from the commons and uncommons. Really deep, really interesting, lots of cool stuff. And I'm really stoked to try out some of these cards. Lots of text on them, but in a good way. You know, we've had a few reviews where it was like, what is going on here? It didn't feel like that here. Maybe I'm biased towards towards Innistrad, but yeah, this set looks dope. Can't wait to try it out. That is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I want to remind you the show's brought to you by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check out the link in the show notes for Marketplace Madness as they make their kind of business transition over to being a marketplace, and you'll see the upsides to that for you as you can shop at a whole bunch of stores at once, basically, to get the best prices on singles. So, and of course, to kick everything off, Marketplace Madness has a bunch of cool giveaways for if you do. And again, I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check that out. If you do pick up anything at the Marketplace or anywhere over there, if you use the affiliate code LR at checkout, it helps out the show. We do appreciate it. Show's also brought to you by FTX. If you're interested in checking out the cryptocurrency space with NFTs or cryptos, and you're looking into invest or dabble in that, FTX is a great place to go do it. They are ftx.us here in the United States, and if you're outside, it's ftx.com. They have a great app and a lot of functionality, and we do encourage you to check them out if you're interested in that. I do also want to remind you once again that neither Luis nor I are investors, registered investors, or any other type, and this isn't investment advice. This is the type of thing that you want to do when you feel confident and when it's something that you can afford to do, not something that you want to force. So keep that in mind as you check them out, and we do appreciate FTX as a sponsor. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. And we'll be back next week with our, what do we call it now, Luis? We got rid of initial impressions because it always feels like the set's been out forever. This one's actually pretty close to initial impressions because we'll only have it for 4 days or whatever. But what do you want to call it again?
Just the kind of Innistrad Midnight Hunt format breakdown, something like that. Format
breakdown, that's what it was. Come on, marketing, buddy. Don't you got to like commit to it here. We'll have our definitive format breakdown.
Exactly.
Early next week. We'll see you then.
So as you saw, because I had to go tend to the brisket during this, I still haven't nailed on the timing on this. So when I do something long in the smoker, it takes something like 12, maybe more hours. And
wow, is that how long this brisket's going to take?
I mean, it's been going on for 7 so far. No, 9, not 9 so far. Wow. We're at 9 and counting. It's probably going to be another 3 or so.
So you are going to hit around 12. Wow, that's incredible.
So once what I did was I put it in at 1 a.m. and then it was ready by about noon because we were having a barbecue, having people over, and that was perfect. The downside is the first 4 or 5 hours I have to be getting up every hour. So I would get up, set an alarm, go to sleep, get up. And I'm very good at falling asleep. As
you are very good at that. I've seen you use that superpower in many different places.
I got I still got like maybe 3 hours of sleep into like 6 hours or whatever between getting up and doing all that. But the other alternatives I did today, which was set an alarm for 5 a.m., which is still very early, but I still got to sleep last night, of course, got a good 5 hours of sleep. And then I wake up at 5 and then do that thing up until the morning. I wonder if the other alternative, which I'm considering, is just starting at a normal time when I wake up, like 8 or 9, and then just not planning on eating the brisket that day. It's ready at 10 or 11 or something, and then I just store it for the next day because it's not like it's.
But fresh, I mean, like right off of the smoker brisket. Come on, man! I don't know you can give that up.
So
how would you reheat it?
So there's a couple ways to reheat it. One way is you slice it, of course. You put it in like a Ziploc bag, and then you put it into hot water to reheat it.
Yeah,
so it
that makes sense.
More. And then you could also reheat it in like an oven or a toaster oven. I would not generally recommend a microwave, but you could. It would still be fine. Okay. So I don't know. I still haven't nailed down the timing on this. It's a little easier when you're talking like ribs or a 6-hour cook. If you want to eat it for lunch, you just do it in the morning. If you want to eat it later, you just do it around midday. But I don't know. The brisket is the best anyway. So I'm still play testing, and I'll figure out the optimal solution.
But crafting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to work on this.